Hello everybody, welcome back to another Elder Scrolls Legends tier list video. My name is Dariloth. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. This is going to be our intelligence one. We've already done agility and endurance, so if you have not seen the placements for those yet, they will all be on this tier list and you can see them here, but there are also two other entire videos that you can watch on the channel, and those will all be in a playlist that you guys can find if you would be interested in watching all of those. So we're going to kick things off with the Abyssian Navigator. The Abyssian Navigator, also I zoomed the screen in so I can actually read the cards finally. But the Abyssian Navigator is a 2-cost 3/1 with the summon effect of, if the top card of your deck is in action, draw it. Otherwise, put it on the bottom. Now this card for me, it's good, but it's very reliant on if you have actions in your deck and if you're going to be able to draw those. I put these in a lot of my mage lists that are just, focused on stuff like Mage's Trick, Ice Spike, that kind of thing, Lightning Bolt, Piercing Javelin. But I really have rotten luck and I barely ever draw anything with these types of cards, so that's just a skill issue. But Abyssian Navigator, I like it. I think it just belongs in mage type, mage type action decks, basically, or sorcerer, or wherever you're using blue and actions at the same time. Abner Tharn is up next. This is a 6-cost 5/5 with the summon effect of Abner Tharn uses the summon ability of a creature. Abner, oh, well, where'd he go? Abner is going to go right up into S tier for me. I really, really enjoy Abner. I think that he's got tons of utility. First things first, he's got this 5/5 stat line, which is good. 5/5 is a pretty standard stat line for a lot of decent creatures. We've got like Sails Through Storms, Eclipse Baroness, Nixox, Burn Clan's got 5 attack, 3 defense, but you get the gist. It's a good stat line to have, especially for the cost of the card only being 1 extra compared to the stat line. And then when we look at the summon effect, you have to kind of read this carefully. So Abner Tharn uses the summon ability of a creature. So Abner can use the summon effect of any creature, not just your own creatures. It has to be a creature that's on the board. So your opponent, for instance, if they played a Corner Club Gambler, you could use Abner Tharn, you could throw him down, and then you could use the summon effect of Corner Club Gambler on Abner Tharn. This gets really cool when you use cards like Dark Rebirth or Doppelgangers on Abner Tharn. You can really spiral out of control with him and just continue summoning and summoning and summoning. I use him in my Ulfric's Covenant video, or deck, I suppose I should say, which is one of my favorites, and I consistently have a ton of fun with him. So, strong body, very powerful summon effect. He has like endless utility because he can be any card in the game, technically. Okay, Alfiq Conjurer is next. This is a 6-cost 3/3 with Guard. The summon effect is that you consume a creature to summon a Flame Atronach. If you consumed an Atronach, instead summon a Storm Atronach. I believe this card, I'm not very well versed with the Alfiq Conjurer, honestly. I'm going to put it I'm going to set it in Great for now because I want to talk about this card. I believe that this used to summon a Lava Atronach, but I'm not 100% on that. This thing, I remember it was kind of controversial for a while, so someone will have to say something in the comments below about that. As it stands right now, I think that the consume effect on it is fine. It's very reliant on you playing a deck that has Atronachs in it, which is not very hard to do if you're playing Mage or Sorcerer. You just throw in that one card that generates Atronachs, or Mage's Retreat. Any of those kind of things can generate Atronachs. But I don't think that just getting a Flame Atronach or a Storm Atronach is super insane. However, I don't know. We've got to kind of look at this and break it down. It's got a keyword. It's got a 3/3 stat line. Alongside the fact that it's going to be summoning another creature that it will guard, I do think that that probably bumps it up into Great. Because even with just the Flame Atronach that it's summoning, you're going to get an 8/6 stat line because Flame Atronachs are 5/3s. So you'll get an 8/6 stat line for 6 if you just consume a creature, basically. And if you consume a Flame Atronach, then you're getting, what, a 10/8 stat line, because that's Storm Atronachs is 5 or 7/5. So yeah, anyway, long conversation about the Alfiq Conjurer, but I do think it's a pretty great card. I think that we'll find that a lot of the cards in Intelligence are going to generally be pretty good. Okay, Altmer Flameslinger is up next. This is a 1/3 for 2 with the keyword of ward, and at the start of your turn, the Altmer Flameslinger deals 1 damage to your opponent. I think this thing's just consistently solid. You can put this in a lot of decks and get some value with it. It works very well with Empower type cards, and it can just be kind of an annoying card to put down, something that your opponent has to deal with eventually, because if this thing is up for 30 turns, it will kill your opponent. So, yeah, you just need to, I don't know, be aware of this card. It's a good early game card, I think, with the 1/3 stat line plus a keyword. The only downside is that it hits your opponent. It's an upside and a downside because you might be playing a deck that doesn't want to damage your opponent. But I think that all things considered, it's good in arena type decks. It's good in a lot of mage and sorcerer lists that I can't speak today with my S's, man. It's good in a lot of mage and sorcerer lists that I can think of. And yeah, I don't know. I just like it. So I'm going to put it up into solid. Okay, Ancano. This is our second S tier card in blue already. Ancano is a 5/5 for 8 with Breakthrough, and the summon effect of deal 5 damage. Your actions have Breakthrough is the other tag on this card. So Ancano is amazing. He is kind of a staple of any kind of blue deck that you're playing. Typically wants to have this card. It's like Galen in purple. There's not really a reason to not run Galen, not really a reason to not run Ungolem, and not really a reason to not run Ancano most of the time. He's a very powerful high-end creature. His instant deal 5 damage, I mean, that's a whole rune chunk of damage. So you're going to be able to chunk your opponent down pretty easily if you hit them in the face. And then interestingly with him too, because he has breakthrough, if you do this on a creature, any remaining damage that didn't kill the creature will go and hit your opponent as well. So if you killed an Ungolem with Ancano, you would still deal 4 damage with that 5 damage breakthrough. To your opponent's face. And then all other actions having breakthrough is just crazy. So this doesn't do anything, obviously, for some actions. Something like the ultimate heist, this is not going to do anything for that because this is not a damaging action. Mute, it's not going to do anything for that. Mummify, not going to do anything for that. But when you start getting to some of your, damaging actions, then it's really going to shine through. Lightning Bolt, for example, is a 4-cost action that deals 4 damage, and that having breakthrough is just crazy. Fingers of the Mountain having breakthrough is pretty good. Spirit Knife with breakthrough is incredible, and the Red Year with breakthrough is the real combo with this because the Red Year deals 10 damage to everything on the board. If you have breakthrough with that, you just need a few creatures on the board to die from the Red Year, and you can deal a huge amount of damage to your opponent, potentially killing them in one turn. So it's very, very, very cool. Okay, Arcanium Librarian is up next. This is a 2-cost 0/2. He gains +1/+0 when you draw a card during your turn. Look, Arcanium Librarian, I just made a video about him a month ago. He might be why, but I think that he's niche. I think properly he's niche. The thing with this card is that you really have to build an entire deck around it, like what I did. But in that deck, we did get this thing up to 30 attack power, which was crazy. So if you haven't seen that video, I recommend watching it at some point because I had a lot of fun playing it. And feel free to try the deck code out for yourself at some point. But yeah, Arcanium Librarian is a silly card based off of a silly character from Skyrim. One of my favorite characters from Skyrim because he actually has a personality, unlike a lot of them. And yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of fun with this card. So I wish I could put it higher, but I don't really think that it is. It will come out as a 0/2. It will gradually increase. But you need to have cards that are going to be consistently drawing to really get a high amount of value for this. So throwing down a 0/2 doesn't necessarily feel good all the time. And if you're just playing this, in a normal kind of deck, I don't really think you're going to get any value from it. Okay, Arcane Enchanter. This is a 3-cost support, and it's ongoing. When you draw an item, you give it a random keyword. Yeah, this thing's pretty good. The only problem is that you have to be running a item-dependent deck. And in putting this down, you are also, you know, reducing the consistency, I would say, overall of your deck because you're putting in a support that potentially could get removed. And you're sacrificing some space in your deck to put this in, obviously. So you're not going to be drawing as many powerful cards in your item type decks. You guys are going to find out pretty quickly I don't really value items in this game all that much. There are some standout items, definitely for sure. But I think that a entirely item-based deck is weaker than just an entirely creature-based deck. So Arcane Enchanter, it's good in item-based decks, and item-based decks for sure are going to have their moments to shine. I do like playing item-based decks. I just don't think that they're as valuable as other kinds of decks in this game. So yeah, that's kind of why the placement for Arcane Enchanter is where it is at. Up next, we have the Ash Piercer. This is a 5-cost 3/4 with the summon effect of deal 3 damage to a creature if you have a creature with 5 power or more. I'm not really a big fan of this card. I'm going to throw it into Y for now. Yeah, not really a huge fan. The thing with a lot of these Dagoth cards is that they require you to have a 5 power creature on the board. Um, this works kind of well in Dagoth because there's a lot of creatures with 5 power that you're going to want to be having in your deck. The Dagoth, what is it? Dagoth's Enforcer, the 5/5 with Drain, Ward, and all that cool stuff. That's a great example of a card that you could have out that would deal something cool. But honestly, with Ash Piercer here, it's more of a arena type card that as far as I can tell, I would rather just run Reverberating Strike, or I'd rather just run Lightning Bolt in this case than play an Ash Piercer, because the 3 damage that you're going to be dealing to a creature, it could be nice. Um, but I don't know. I've never seen this and wanted to put it in a deck. So maybe it's good. Like I say, you guys can flame me in the comments all that you want for a lot of these cards. If you think that Ash Piercer deserves a higher spot, um, feel free to write me an angry comment down below. But I just don't really think that it gets out of Y. I think that there's better 5-cost creatures that you could play in blue. Speaking of, well, I guess we'll find one eventually. Ash Servant is a 4-cost 2/2 with the summon effect of deal 2 damage to a creature. So essentially, Ash Servant is a 4-cost 4/2 with the summon effect of deal 2 damage to a creature, being added in there. I think this thing's fine. I don't know quite where I would put it with this ranking system. Like, it's fine. It's not great. I really should just have a fine tier. um, yeah, I don't know. Consistently, it's okay. Like, it's a solid choice for some blue decks that maybe want to do a little bit of creature damage or a little bit of reach. But overall, it's one of these cards again that I'm not super like thrilled to have in my deck. I might put it down into Y, but it's decent in arena. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'll I'll put it into I'll put it into Y for now. I just don't really like it that much. Attuned Dremora. This is a 5-cost 4/5 with the summon effect of gain all keywords friendly creatures have. This, I would say, goes into niche. It's dependent on playing a keyword type deck. Now, it can be quite good in many decks across the board. So it doesn't necessarily have one archetype that it falls under. It's most played in Invade, though, because it's a Daedra, of course, and it's focused on keywords. So that's really the main place that you would want to see this in. But you could get some value with specific kind of decks. Like if you're doing a assassin type deck, and let's say you want to give this thing charge every time that you put it down, you could just put in Cliff Racers and Bandari Opportunists and everything like that, and then you could just get a 5-cost 4/5 with charge pretty consistently there. So there's ways to make this work in your favor in certain kinds of decks. I just think that it's something you're going to have to consider when you put this in your deck, I suppose. Although this could work in, you know what, I'll put it in solid. This could work in a variety of decks, I'll say. So keywords aren't super uncommon to have in your deck, and I guess getting a free keyword that another friendly creature has is not going to be a problem most of the time. So the stat line's decent, the cost is okay, and the summon effect, while it is a little bit dependent on the board state that you put it down during, it does get a lot of value. It can potentially generate a ton of value, actually. Okay, Balmora Spallmaster is a 2-cost 0/1 with the last gasp effect of summon a random creature with cost less than or equal to your max magicka. This card is just probably going into solid or great. It's very, very RNG dependent. I will put it in solid because this thing can give you, you know, something that you really don't want, or it could give you something insanely powerful. It's just a total RNG machine. I really like Balmora Spymaster, but it's also not the most consistent thing in the world. So very fun to play with. You'll always be getting some kind of a creature, so you can't really say that you're not getting something out of putting a Spymaster down, but like you could get a Morthal Watchman. So uh, yeah, it's solid. It's consistently okay. It's only 2 cost also. Okay, Barrelzar's Tinkering. This is a 2-cost action. With Betray, transform a creature into a random creature that costs 1 more. This is another kind of RNG card. It actually pairs very well with the Balmora Spymaster, but I do value it a bit more. So the thing with Tinkering is that if you play this, let's say, on a Tazcad the Packmaster, where did I put him? Is he in Great? He's in Great. Good. So if you play this on a Tazcad the Packmaster, he will turn into a 10 cost creature. Now, if you look at our 10 costs here, we've got the Hulking Scalon, and we've got Mannimarco here. Trying to look for any more that we've put, but we don't really need to just look for examples here. But it could turn into potentially some of those creatures, right? There's not a big pool of 10 cost creatures, and typically the higher you tinker a card, the more consistent value you're going to get. So if you were to tinker a 1-cost card, you wouldn't get that high of a value because you could get anywhere from a Windkeep Spellsword to I don't know what's a 2-cost down here that we can pick on, to the Hellstrom Footpad. So you could get anything from that range of cards, and it's not super great. Like I said, it's good to play on lower cost creatures just to get that tinker chain going. It can be comboed in, or it's good to play on. It's not good to play on lower cost creatures to get the tinker chain going. I would say play this on creatures that are 5 cost or higher, and you'll get the most value with it because anything under that is probably diminishing returns. Okay, next up is the Baron of Tyr. This guy's a 4-cost 3/3 with the summon effect of give other friendly intelligence creatures +1, +0, and guard. Unfortunately, I don't think this thing's all that good in this economy. So, Baron of Tyr is from the core set. It's a card that you get to get from the main story, and I remember it. I remember enjoying it back in the day when this game was new, but I think that over time this thing's just gotten less and less valuable. There's not a whole lot of blue decks that are really focused on guards as a mechanic. Um, I guess that is where Baron of Tyr can come in handy. I guess I'll throw him into niche. He can come in handy if you're trying to play a defensive blue list, but I don't really think that just the +1 and guard is really all that valuable. He also doesn't buff himself, he only buffs other creatures. And typically a lot of the intelligence creatures that we're going to look at are very wobbly in their stat line. They're probably going to be a lot like the Abyssian Navigator, where they have a 3/1 stat line, or like Librarian, a 0/2. Um, Unless we're talking about our unique legendaries up here, they're pretty good in their stat lines. But even something like the Altmer Flameslinger, it's a 1/3, so it's not very consistent with its health and damage pool. So I think that just in general, giving everyone guard, it's good, but it's not going to be that applicable in every kind of deck. He's decent in arena, but I think overall there's probably better stuff that you could play. But if you are going for this very specific kind of archetype, you can go ahead and play Baron of Tyr. I won't fault you for that. Okay, we have the Battle Reeve of Dusk up next. This is a 6-cost 3/3 with the summon effect of give friendly creatures +1/+1 for each keyword they have. I think again this just goes into niche, so it's not quite the same as the Attuned Dremora, which is going to give itself keywords and get a buff, and it's got a little bit more utility. I think that the Battle Reeve of Dusk specifically belongs in keyword heavy decks because it says right there +1/+1 for each keyword that they have. So you want to be stacking keywords if you're using this type of card in that type of deck. And the best way to do that would be to play it in Invade. I guess, or something that's really benefiting from all these keywords with the Arcane Enchanter and that one Prophecy card that summons keywords, and maybe even Baron of Tyr because he gives guard. So I suppose those two could combo potentially well together. But at the end of the day, you're paying a 6 cost for a 3/3 creature that may or may not get a decent amount of value. So it's a little bit up in the air. It depends on the board state and it depends on the deck that you are playing. Black Worm, what is that, a Neophyte or probably a Necrophyte? Black Worm Necrophyte, 4/3 for 4. Summon effect is consume a creature, then you summon a 1/1 skeleton with its keywords. A lot of keyword stuff in blue. Um, I mean, this thing's fine. Like, I don't really have a problem with this. It's a 4 cost 4/3, which is not as bad to me as this Ash Piercer that's a 5 cost 3/4. Or even the kind of wobbly stat line on the Ash Servant here, with the 2/2 body for 4, which I'm not really a fan of that disparity in the stat lines. But the Black Worm Necrophyte, it's a 4/3 for 4, so it's a little bit fairer. And the summon effect is, it's okay if you've got a card with some decent keywords in the discard pile. You'll at least be resurrecting a skeleton that has more value typically than the ones like that you can generate down here from the Ancestral Dead. Like that's just it's going to be a little bit more valuable. So I don't really have a problem with it. It's fine if you want to run it, but I just probably wouldn't. It dies to a lot of different types of removal as well with the 4/3. It can die from Fell the Mighty, and Reverberating Strike, Lightning Bolt, all that kind of stuff. It just misses out on those smaller type of removal spells like Execute and Arrowstorm. Okay, up next is Blast from Oblivion. This is a 3 cost action with Prophecy. You invade, and then you deal damage equal to your Oblivion portal's level to a creature. In Invade, I would put this card in S tier, but because of the way that we're doing these rankings, I think that this thing remains in Niche. A lot of the Invade cards are going to be in Niche because they are very specifically supposed to be in one kind of a deck. I might break that rule for Blast from Oblivion, though. I really hate this card. It's basically Lightning Bolt, but it scales off of your Oblivion Gates level, and it's cheaper than Lightning Bolt as well. It's very, very easy to get your Oblivion Portal up to a high level. So when we have cards like this, it just adds to the consistency of Invade, and it makes it so that way it's harder to destroy the portal. Not a big fan of this. I don't think it's very well balanced, but it is what it is. But yeah, I'm going to keep it a niche for now, but it typically, well, not typically, you would not play that outside of Invade, but in Invade, it is very good. Okay, Blood Sorceress is up next. This is a 1 cost 2/1. At the start of your turn, if you have 7 or more max magicka, you deal 5 damage to your opponent. I think this thing's solid. I don't have a single problem with this card. I think it's actually maybe a little bit better. The thing with this is that it's very intimidating. You're threatening to break a rune on your opponent's life, I don't know, health bar, I guess. You're threatening to break a rune on your opponent's health bar, and it is something that immediately has to be removed. Otherwise, you're going to take a ton of damage. So honestly, I don't know if I would say that this is like better than anything in Solid. It does evoke a strong reaction from people. I would say it's probably in line with a lot of these cards here in Solid, though. So I think that's where she'll stay. She's good, though. Running 3 of these is a lot of fun. And yeah, I had fun playing with these the other day, actually, in a deck I was trying to get to work, but wasn't. But she's still definitely a lot of fun. Okay, Breton Conjurer. This is a 4 cost 1/1 with Ward, and when Breton Conjurer's Ward is broken, summon a 5/5 Frost Atronach with Guard. I think this thing's also pretty solid. The only thing holding this back is that its stat line is actually very bad, but the thing that you can do with Breton Conjurer to make up for that is you can give it Ward again, and you can basically do this asinine cycle where if you're playing something like Battle Mage, you could have Ward Crafters go down, give another ward, then you could shoot Breton Conjurer with Rapid Shot, pop the ward off, and then you put another ward on. It's just a whole different it's a whole crazy cycle that you can wind up doing with this guy to get a ton of Frost Atronachs. It's very, very annoying, but it has to be under the right conditions that this thing is great. This thing does die to a lot of removal. If he's silenced, he's just done. Execute can kill him. Aerostorm can kill him. Um, what else? Luminous Shards can kill him without even getting a Empower buff. Um, Trying to think of more things. Basically, any of the hard removals and any of the soft removals and silence is really going to affect this guy. So that's why I am not putting him in great, but I do think that he is very, very good. He's probably higher in he's higher in the solid tier than like the Blackworm Necrophyte, but I think they still kind of occupy a similar tier, maybe. Well, now that I'm thinking of that, Blackworm Necrophyte doesn't really seem all that good. We'll put him up here for now. He's pretty good, right? Okay, Brilliant Experiment. This is a 3-cost action. You draw a copy of a friendly creature. Again, I think this is just a good card. The only thing holding it back is that it's just a copy of a card. It's not like it's that you're drawing a copy of a card. You're not instantly playing it or anything like that. So any of the stuff that you're really going to want to copy, like your high-end stuff here, like Ancano or Abner Tharn, typically you're going to copy this and then that's going to be your turn because you're not going to be able to play the big thing that you just copied. Other than that, though, I think Brilliant Experiment is good. It can just kind of be dead weight in your hand sometimes, and that's not always the best thing when you are playing the Elder Scrolls Legends. Okay, Bringer of Nightmares is up next. This is a 7-cost 4/4. The summon effect is that you see a vision of a random creature, then you must choose a creature to transform into it. This thing's pretty cool. I like this card quite a bit. I would put this thing up in great. However, I really don't like the stat line. The stat line really bothers me on this thing. Um, you can. This is another one of those really RNG type cards. Um, it's annoying because you must choose a creature to transform it into. So, like, let's say that you get a Morthal Watchman. Okay, well now you got to sacrifice one of your cards or your opponent's cards to turn it into a Morthal Watchman. If you are just playing this on an empty board and you have to turn one of your cards into that card, that can really feel bad to play against or to play with, I suppose. But if you roll something like that and you can put it on one of your opponent's creatures, that's really high value. So this thing just it's RNG. I think it's good, but it's not super consistent. So I don't really feel like I can put it much higher than solid. Plus, its own stat line is, it's not that impressive for the cost. Okay, Brutal Ashlander. This is a 1/1 for 1 with the last gasp of deal 3 damage to an enemy creature. It may be wrong, but my instinct is telling me that this is great. But upon looking at our great tier, I don't really think that it is. I think I'm going to put him into solid. This guy's always going to do some damage for you, unless he gets silenced, of course. But if he does get silenced, then your opponent wasted an entire silence effect just to stop the Brutal Asslander. And I think that that's a job well done on his part, especially when you start combining other cards with this guy, like Dark Rebirth. Any kind of last gasp, like Necrom Mastermind type card, is going to do very well with this guy. So yeah, I think that he has the potential to do a lot of damage in the early, middle, or late game, depending on when you draw him. And he's just a lot of fun to play with. Plus, I like calling him the Brutal Asslander. Okay, Burning Touch. This is basically Firebolt with Prophecy. So it's a 3-cost action with Prophecy, deal 2 damage to a creature. I'm throwing this in Y. I've never really seen a reason to use this. I honestly forget that it's in the game half the time. The only thing saving this is that it's got a Prophecy attached to it, but you might as well play Firebolt, in my opinion, because it's 2-cost cheaper. You might as well play Reverberating Strike at the 3-cost stat line there. You might as well play, I don't know, anything else. There's a lot of other things that you can use. Channeled Storm, look at that right there. The only thing that this thing's missing compared to Burning Touch is the Prophecy, but it's not really that big of a trade-off. Okay, Camlorn Hero. This is a 3-cost 4/2 with the summon effect of deal 2 damage to your opponent. Now, where I was talking about Ash Piercer, I think this is a good example of what makes a card good and what makes a card not so good. So, Camlorn Hero, or I guess Ash Servant. Here, so Camlorn Hero and Ash Servant have very similar niches. Camlorn Hero is specifically going to be doing face damage. Ash Servant is specifically going to be dealing creature damage. Now, I don't think that Ash Servant's creature damage is as valuable as Camlorn Hero's face damage, because face damage is how you win the game. And also, sometimes you might just not be able to get a kill with Ash Servant, and then you just chipped away at your opponent a little bit, which can be good if you're using things like Finish Off or Leaf Lurkers, I suppose. But that 4 cost that you're paying is still only for a 2/2 body. Camlorn Hero has a 4/2 body for 1 less than Ash Servant, and it's dealing 2 damage on top of that. So I think Ash Servant, even if it was a 3/2, it would be much better than that 2/2 that it's at. Anyway, Camlorn Hero I think is pretty good. He does consistent damage. He's got a good stat line, a powerful stat line, I should say, and yeah, he's not that interesting to talk about, really. he's just pretty decent. Camlorn Sentinel, on the other hand, this is a 3-cost 2/4 with Prophecy and Guard. I also don't have a problem with this. I think the Prophecy is nice on here. The 2/4 Guard is doing a bit more for you than, let's say, the Prophecy on the Burning Touch, right? Because this thing can at least guard your face. It's not just 2 random creature damage that you're going to be doing. So Camlorn Sentinel, yeah, I don't quite like to use this card, I'll say. I'm trying to judge it more objectively. I don't use this in any of my blue lists. I think that there's probably something better that you can do than use the Camlorn Sentinel. Um, Hell, you could probably use Baron of Tyr. You could probably use Baron of Tyr instead to just give other creatures guard instead of Camlorn Sentinel. The Prophecy is cool. But even in like Prophecy Battle Mage, I think there's probably better things for you than Camlorn Sentinel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just gonna put him into Y for now. I don't think he's as like egregious as Burning Touch, and even these two are like they're not egregious. They're just not very good as compared to some of the other things in blue, because blue is a very good color in general, so that's kind of why these guys are down here. And Camlorn Sentinel, I think, is in a similar boat. Okay, we're up against the Cartel Arcanist next. This is a 3-cost 2/3. The wax effect of this card, because it's a Waxwayne Khajiit, is +2/+0. The Wane is that you shackle an enemy creature. I would also just put this in solid. It's decent. Both of them are fine. So if you play it on Wax, you're going to get a 4/3 for 3. And if you play it on Wane, you're going to get a Shackle off for nothing. So very nice, especially if you pair this thing with a Moongate. It's a 4/3 that can Shackle, which is pretty damn cool. And yeah, I don't really have any problems with playing it as is. A 2/3 for 3 that can Shackle, or a 4/3 for 3 with flat damage. Channeled Storm. Okay, I'm going to put this into... Man, I don't know. I think I'm just going to put it into solid again. The only thing with this card, I guess I should explain it. It's a 3-cost action that deals 3 damage to a creature, and then you can empower it to gain +1 damage for your Channeled Storm. So if you have a lot of cards that are dealing a lot of face damage, like the Camlorn Hero, like the Altmer Flameslinger, then this thing's going to get higher and higher in damage. It just requires you to deal damage to your opponent, which can kind of be tricky sometimes because you don't want to be breaking a bunch of your opponent's runes, right? So I think the requirement behind this is why I would keep it from great. It doesn't quite seem to fall in line with a lot of these other ones, but I do think that since its inclusion in the game, I do use it quite a bit in a lot of my decks, and I think that in its own deck, it is pretty good. I mean, you can very easily, you know what, we'll put it up to great. I think you can very easily get this thing up to 4 or 5 damage in the right kind of deck, and even just normally, you can get it up to 4, which is uh, lightning bolts damage, but for 1 less cost. So yes, it does have a bit of a requirement to it, but I do think that Channeled Storm is pretty decent overall. Okay, Clockwork City Pilgrim. This is a 3-cost 3/3 with guard, and then it also has Exalt 3 to gain +2/+2. So if you Exalt this thing, you would have a 5/5 guard for 6. If you don't Exalt it, it's a 3/3 for 3 with guard. The 3/3 for 3 with guard is fine, so I'm going to put it into. I think this card actually probably resides in niche. This card wants to be exalted by the tribunal, you know, priest guy that's going to do that. Um, it it exists purely for exalt decks where it's going to get more value than it would normally. But the 3/3 for 3 I don't mind. I just think that it's not as good as some other cards, like I've said before. But if you did just want like a highly statted guard, I mean, this is not a bad choice for you. Um, it's just, it's not going to be that good all the time. Okay, College of Winterhold. This is a 5-cost support. I think I'm going to put it into. I'm going to put it into Great. This has the effect. It's a 3-use support, and it has the activate effect of look at 3 random 1-cost actions and choose one. Then increase the cost that the action draws by 1. So this thing can get prolonged and extended pretty easily by like the Tower Alchemist type cards and the Cauldron Keeper. Those can really make College of Winterhold spiral pretty far. Even without those, though, you're getting 6 Magicka worth of actions from the College of Winterhold itself, which is a 5-cost support. It's just spread out over 3 turns, and those 1-cost actions can be really cool. We have some featured here, like Arrow in the Knee is pretty decent. Bewildering Speed is okay. Mute is one of the 1-cost actions, so even getting this off um, just for the 1-cost action is pretty good. Rapid Shot is another one that we'll talk about in Strength. But yeah, I think that overall, College of Winterhold provides early access on the turn that it's played to good cards, and it just continues to do so the longer that you have it out, even if you just have it out for 3. But again, it is an RNG type card, so I'm not as tempted to throw it into S tier as I am with the other ones that I speak highly of. Okay, up next we have the Conjuration Scholar. This is a 1/2 for 6, and the summon effect is that you summon a 5/5 Frost Atronach with Guard. I think this one goes into Great. In total, what we're getting with the Conjuration Scholar is a 6/7 stat line, because if you add the Frost Atronach's 5/5 to the Conjuration Scholar's 1/2, you gain the 6/7. So we're getting a 6/7 stat line for 6, just split between 2 creatures. And you're also getting a guard to block up your lane. It can give you an Atronach to use for Alfiq Conjurer, which is super cool. And the Conjuration Scholar also works very well. This is a notorious combo with the Barrelzar's Tinkering, because it generates a 6-cost creature, and then the Frost Atronach is a 5-cost creature. So either of those are great targets for Tinkering, because Conjuration Scholar has a horrible stat line. So almost any 7-cost creature that you turn it into is going to be nice. Like if you get Nahag Leave after playing Conjuration Scholar, that's just a flat out buff, and a pretty insane buff too. So yeah, very fun card, very fun to combo with, and I think that the value that it provides is just very decent on its own. Okay, up next we've got this asshole, the Conjuration Tutor. This guy's a 6-cost 3/3. He's going into S tier. So his summon effect is that he shuffles 3 Lava Atronach into your deck, and then when you summon an Atronach, you summon a copy in the other lane. Yes, this card is a little bit reliant on playing Atronach type decks, but like I just said, the Conjuration Scholar to me is a great card. The Alfiq Conjurer is a great card. And if you got this guy out with these other great cards, he's going to be doubling what they do. He also summons 3 Lava Atronachs into your deck, which are insane in and of themselves. They are just these hugely beefy guards with ward. I believe they have an 8/8 stat line with guard and ward. So he'll summon 3 of those, which are crazy, and then he can duplicate those himself. Most people I've found when they play this thing, they immediately draw a Lava Atronach, which is just crazy bad luck on my end. So I really hate that card. It was added late into the game's life cycle, and it's one of those cards that I always complain about and say that I think needs a bit of a nerf. Okay, Corsair Ship is up next. This is a 4-cost 4-cost support. It's ongoing, and the summon effect is that you summon a 1/1 Corsair. When you summon a creature, equip it with a Steel Dagger. Corsair ship is kind of like the Divine Fervor of blue, except instead of gaining a +1/+1 stat line for all creatures, we're gaining just a +1. Uh, and we're generating an item in the process of doing that. So you'll have a bunch of steel daggers in your discard pile, which can be nice for utility reasons because you could always pull those out later with cards like Excavate, um, or Salvage is another really good one um, to do with that. But yeah, Corsair Ship, it provides more than just items. It's not a totally item-based card. If you wanted to run this in any of your blue type decks, you'd at least get some value for every one of your creatures in a less convoluted way than the Baron of Tyr, for example. Um, so yeah, I think that Corsair Ship belongs in solid. It's always going to give you some decent value. It's not super great or amazing. It's not like Thieves' Den that's going to give you that +1/+1 for pilfering, but it is going to give you just a decent boost to all of your creatures that are on board. Okay, Court Wizard. This is a 5-cost 3/5 with the summon effect of draw a card if you have 2 other intelligence creatures. This is niche. It's reliant on you playing a deck that is mostly, if not all, intelligence. Kind of falls into the same camp that the Stonehill Mammoth does, or that other green one, the Sightless Skulk. So those are all kinds of cards that are more or less asking you to play mono, whatever color they are. So Court Wizard wants you to be playing mono blue. I have a mono blue deck on the channel. I believe Court Wizard is in it. It's a fun card in its own deck, but it's not anything super amazing outside of it. Okay, Covenant Oathman is up next. This is a 4-cost 2/4. The summon effect is that if you have a strength card in play, you draw a random item from your deck, and if you have an endurance card in play, you give an item in your hand, +2/+2. This is another one of the Oathmen. This is another card that wants to be played in a specific kind of deck. So we have our Oathmen somewhere in this tier. Yep, there they are. So we're going to move him up with the Oathmen because this is where he belongs. Covenant Oathman will go right here. So we have Dominion, Empire, Telvanni, Redoran, and Covenant. Yeah, Covenant Oathman wants to be played in Daggerfall decks. That's where he shines. He can be decent in just like a item battle mage, but there's probably better stuff that you can use in that instance. Craglorn Scavenger is a 3-cost 1/2 with the effect of when you play or activate a support, Craglorn Scavenger gains +1/+1. I would say this thing's also niche. It belongs in support type decks with the Cauldron Keeper and the Tower Alchemist going off at the same time. But I've heard that this thing can be very good. I've never really played with it all that much myself. So it's kind of like, it reminds me of Arcanium Librarian a bit, where you have to build a deck around it, but it can spiral pretty heavily. So let me know if you guys have ever played with Craglorn Scavenger and if you've enjoyed it. Okay, Crown Quartermaster is a 1-cost 2/1 with the summon effect of put a steel dagger in your hand. This might be a hot take, but I think this card's pretty great, actually. It's a 1-cost, which is, it's typically not going to be too powerful. Maybe I'll put it into solid. Yeah, I think that it fits better in solid. But I still value this card quite highly. It is a 1-cost creature that already has a 2/1 stat line, so you're getting some early damage in on your opponent. And it's going to give you this steel dagger that just adds a ton of utility. I have killed so many of my opponents because of the steel dagger that the Crown Quartermaster generated. Like, you just hold that thing in your inventory for a bit, and then you can put it on some creature and you can just secure the win, or you can kill a creature that you just needed that 1 damage to finish off. So it generates value without actually having to put a steel dagger in your starting deck. You can just put this thing down and then you can get one immediately. And if you have cards out like the Enchanting Table or Arcane Enchanter, that will actually gain a buff. If that's out, any card that's generated like that will gain the buff as well. So it's good. I really like it. It's good for the early game. And I do use this thing also in one of my tinkering decks because you put it down, it generates a steel dagger, and then you can sacrifice it with the Betray for Barrelzar's Tinkering, and then you could turn like your Conjuration Scholar into an 8-cost creature instead of a 7. Okay, Crucible Blacksmith. This is a 2-cost 0/1. The summon effect is you draw an item of choice from your deck. Okay, now say it with me, kids. Crucible Blacksmith is niche. Um, yeah, this thing's entirely reliant on being in an item deck. If you don't have items, this card doesn't do anything. It's a 0/1, which is crazy. The Crucible Blacksmith, I will say, is very cool because I realized recently that it is actually the blacksmith from the town of Crucible or I guess not town, but subset of New Sheoth in the Shivering Isles. This is that wood elf that makes you the Madness armor, I believe, which is pretty cool. Okay, Cruel Firebloom. This is a 0-cost action that allows you to sacrifice a creature to deal 5 damage to a random enemy. I am going to put this thing into Great. I think that it allows for a lot of very interesting play because you can generate low-cost creatures, again, like the Crown Quartermaster, and you can turn them into volatile damage against your opponent. This thing's also very fun if you play it with Ancano because it gets that breakthrough and then the 5 damage. I believe this is how it works. I haven't done this in a while, but yeah, Cruel Firebloom will do breakthrough damage to anything that it hits with that damage. So while it is random, sacrifice a creature to deal 5 damage to a random enemy. If your opponent only has one creature out, it's only going to hit that creature and deal 5 damage to them. So there are ways to tutor this thing to get it onto the right enemy that you want to hit. It just takes a little bit of practice and work. But in the right hands, I think Cruel Firebloom is a menace of a card. Okay, Crystal Tower Crafter. This is a 2-cost 1/1. After you play an action, Crystal Tower Crafter gains +1/+1. Niche, very reliant on you playing actions in your deck. While this isn't necessarily the hardest thing to do, and Crystal Tower Crafter can spiral pretty far out of control in the right deck, it's very reliant on your opening hand and some of that initial draw that you're going to be getting. So if you play a Crystal Tower Crafter and then you just put it down turn 2 and you don't see an action for a while, you're going to feel pretty stupid for having played this card. Cunning Ally. This is a 3-cost 3/3 with the summon effect of put a firebolt into your hand if the top card of your deck is blue. Now I'm going to put this up into solid because I think that it's a little bit more consistent than the one guy, than the Court Wizard. Any of these cards that are asking for a specific kind of card, like we talked about the Abyssian Navigator down here as well, I believe. Did I put him in niche? Okay, bad example. But Cunning Ally has a better stat line than the Abyssian Navigator because it's a 3/3 for 3. It just has this other alternate effect of put a Firebolt in your hand if the top card of your deck is blue. And Firebolt is a pretty good card in and of itself, especially if you can just generate one into your inventory for free. So I'm going to stick with my placement of the Cunning Ally in solid, even though its art is really weird and it doesn't look like a Dark Elf at all. Okay, Daggerfall Mage, we all know where this is going. It's a 3-cost 2/2 with Ward, and when Daggerfall Mage's Ward is broken, you put a Tome of Alteration into your hand. This, in my opinion, is one of the best cards in blue. It's actually one of the first legendary sets that I crafted, and let's talk about it for a minute. So, Daggerfall Mage with this 3-cost stat line is very, very nice. It tends to show up a lot for me, actually, in those first few turns of the game, so I typically have one down. And it's going to give you this free Tome of Alteration. So, whereas we talked about where did we put him? He's down, he's up at the top of Solid. Breton Conjurer, fuck it, I'll put him into Great. The thing with like Breton Conjurer and with Daggerfall Mage is that they're both cards that are reliant on their ward being broken. Now, Daggerfall Mage already, although it costs less than the Breton Conjurer, has more health, which is super nice. It's got the same ward, obviously, but the effect of the Daggerfall Mage is more repeatable. It's more repeatable due to that stat line being a 2/2, I would say. It combos super well with the Ward Crafter, and Tomes of Alteration, not only are they going to draw you a card, they're going to buff up a creature. So I'd say they're a little bit better than the Frost Atronach with Guard. Now that's not to say that this card is not powerful in the right hands. Both of these do essentially the same thing. but I just think that this thing falling down a little bit earlier and having more health and doing something with a little bit more utility like that is nicer in my head than the Breton Conjurer's Frost Atronach with Guard. But after thinking about it, Breton Conjurer does deserve a bump up, so you don't have to yell at me too hard in the comments for that if you already have. Okay, Daggers in the Dark. It's a zero cost action. You equip a steel dagger to a random friendly creature in each lane. Uh, Not super impressed by it. I wouldn't say that it's unplayable because it's a zero cost and you're going to be getting at least, uh, 2 extra damage on the board with those steel daggers. But, eh, it's not really all that impressive. You could just play anything else to get that extra 2 damage almost. So unless you're doing something very, very specific, I don't really think Daggers in the Dark is all that good. If you're playing like Market, sure, Daggers in the Dark is fine in Swindler's Market, but I don't know, whatever. Dark Rebirth, I'm throwing this up into S tier, I think. So Dark Rebirth um, is a 3 cost action that allows you to sacrifice a creature to summon a copy of it. So let's talk about that with any of the cards that we have up here. If we have a Leaf Lurker out and it has instantly killed a wounded creature, we could play Dark Rebirth to summon another one for 2 cost less than the Leaf Lurker, and his summon effect will proc again, and he'll be able to destroy another wounded creature, which is super valuable. Razum-Dar, if you play Dark Rebirth on him, he will regain charge and be able to run into your opponent and draw another copy of a rune that has been pulled. Ungolem, if you Dark Rebirth him, although you're paying 2 cost extra to do that, he will shuffle, the new one will reshuffle 3 Dark Brotherhood Assassins into your deck. We could go on and on about this. He gains value for creatures in the same way that Abner does. By re-triggering their summon effects, and he's actually, well, not he, the card is actually 3 cost less than Abner. So if you're not looking to get a body on the board and progress the board state like that, Dark Rebirth is just an excellent option um, in order to re-trigger your creature's summon effects. And that's why I mentioned earlier that Abner is very good with Dark Rebirth, because he can re-trigger Abner, which will re-trigger some of your opponent's summon effects if they have any out, which is super, super valuable. Also, another important combo, Ancano Dark Rebirth Mushroom Tower. This is insane because you can play Ancano. Let's say that you have a Mushroom Tower out. You play Ancano, you deal 5 damage. Then you do a Dark Rebirth on Ancano, summon a new one, it deals 5 damage. Then you sacrifice a creature and summon another Ancano because of the Betray with Mushroom Tower. That's 15 damage in one turn. And while that can come pretty late in the game because you have to have a Mushroom Tower out, it's still insane damage. I have killed so many people with just like looping Ancano. Okay, Dark Rift is a 3 cost support. Yeah, it's a 3 cost support. The activate here is that you deal 1 damage to your opponent. If Dark Rift has dealt 5 damage, you sacrifice it to summon a Storm Atronach. Funny enough, Dark Rift can only be used 5 times, even if you have a card out like the Tower Alchemist or the Cauldron Keeper to allow you to activate this more times. It will just automatically sacrifice itself if you've dealt 5 damage. This card has its place in Empower type decks, it has its place in Atronach type decks, and it has its place in just trying to burn down your opponent by dealing a lot of damage to them type stuff. So Dark Rift gets a thumbs up in my book. It is a decent choice. Not my first choice for a lot of decks, but it's a decent choice. Destruction Tutor is a 5-cost 3/5 with the effect of your actions that deal damage cost 2 less. I think this thing is probably a bit niche. The stat line's not super great. It's reliant on you playing a deck that has a lot of damaging actions, so stuff like Channeled Storm, Cruel Fire Bloom, it's not going to do anything to, Lightning Bolt, Ice Storm, all that kind of stuff. It can be very nice to get those discounted, but I mean, we're not always going to need this. I don't think I run this in any of my action type decks, but it could be something that I start to do in the future. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't like offend me. I think that it has a very specific place, and that is where it shall go. Discerning Thief. This is a 3-cost, 3/4 with the Pilfer effect of draw a card, then discard a card. I think that this thing's actually pretty good. There's a lot of value in discarding cards in this game. For one, it helps you dig through your deck a little bit quicker to just draw something and then get rid of something from your hand because you don't always have to have everything in your hand at the same time. Um, but yeah, it can allow you to dig through your deck quicker, and putting stuff in the discard pile is really nice, especially when cards such as Solitaire exist, or the Odiniran Necromancer, stuff like that. It's going to allow you to pull stuff out of your discard pile anyway, and this can be a good combo piece in those types of decks. Okay, Devaith Fear, this is a 11-cost creature with the summon effect of deal 6 damage to a random creature. I'm also going to put Devaith in S tier. I think that Devaith is a very good unique legendary. That 6 damage that he deals, very similar to Cruel Firebloom, can be targeted on specific creatures. And if your opponent doesn't have any creatures out, if you notice the text there, it just says deal 6 damage to a random enemy, not specifically a creature. Your opponent counts as your enemy, so if your opponent doesn't have any creatures out, you will be dealing 6 flat damage to your opponent's face. The Daughters of Fear that he summons at the start of every one of your turns also deal 6 damage. When you start getting more Daughters of Fear, if you use stuff like Dark Rebirth or Abner on those, they will, obviously also shoot out more 6 damage fireballs. So pretty cool stuff to watch and see it pop off. It's a card that needs to be dealt with almost immediately, otherwise it will spiral out of control. Okay, Doppelganger. Doppelganger is a 5-cost 1/1 with the summon effect of transform Doppelganger into another friendly creature, a copy of another friendly creature. I will put this thing up in great. I think that 5 cost is a perfectly valid cost to pay for something like this. But also it can be kind of OP. Again, let's say that you have Devaith Fear out, you just wait one turn. He's already done his 6 damage, then you just play a Doppelganger, you get another one for free. Now that's 2 Devaith Fears that your opponent has to deal with, which can feel really, really shitty to play against sometimes. The only thing I'll say about Doppelganger is that it is, it does have that 5 cost, so it's not going to be as easy to pop out as a Dark Rebirth, but I do think that it's very good, if not equally good, to Dark Rebirth, although something inside me says it's not equally good, so I think that we'll just keep it in A. Okay, so Dragon Priest Mask is up next. This is a 6-cost item with the 2/2 stat line that it adds, and the summon effect of trigger the wielder's summon ability. I think this thing's really good. Specifically, I'm going to put it up into great. Specifically, this card is very good in singleton lists, actually, which I forgot to include this in the singleton sorcerer video that I have on my deck, or that I have on my channel. But it's a very good item, allowing you in a similar sense to re-trigger summon effects. That's a big thing that we've been talking about. So re-trigger Devaith, re-trigger the Conjuration Tutor, re-trigger Odiniran Necromancer. It would actually be very good on that because it would buff his power up too. So any of this kind of re-trigger stuff is going to be inherently powerful because the assumption is that you have made a deck with good creatures with good summons. If you've made a poor deck, then all of this stuff's not going to be very good. But in the right conditions, Doppelganger, Dragon Priest Mask, Abner, and Dark Rebirth are all going to be phenomenal. And the only thing holding this back from being great is the fact that it's got a 6 cost with only a 2/2 stat line that it adds. But even that is pretty good. I would say you probably don't want to run more than 1 or 2 of those in your decks, though. Dragon's Fury, 4-cost action, deal 3 damage to a creature and 3 extra damage for each friendly dragon. This card's kind of what the fuck for me. I don't really see the value in this card. It's technically niche because it's supposed to be played in only dragon type decks. And I guess that there's some world where if you play Ancano with this and a bunch of tiny dragons and whatever, you could get like, what's the max damage on this? If you had 8 dragons out, that would be 24 damage plus the 3. So it could get up to 27 damage if you had only dragons out on the board, if I did my math correctly. But like, I don't know. It's not all that. When are you going to need that much damage? Um, it just doesn't really catch my interest all that well, but it is specifically meant for dragon-based decks, so it'll go into niche. I think in those kind of decks, sure, you can get some value for it, but no, I'm going to put it in Y. I don't like this thing. I think it's stupid. I, I think I'd rather play Lightning Bolt or Spirit Knife or something with more value. Fingers of the Mountain, like, come on, dumb card. Um, okay, Dragon Star Rider is a 5-cost 3/3. When Dragon Star Rider equips an item, you draw a card. I'm tempted to put him into niche, but I think I'm going to put him into solid, just because the draw effect is super nice. And if you have something like Corsair Ship out already, when you put the Dragon Star Rider down, he's automatically going to draw a card from getting equipped with a dagger. Crown Quartermaster can put a dagger on him pretty easily, so he allows this engine to sort of run with item type decks. So I think he's one of the better item cards that you can have. Dremora Adept. This is a 3-cost 4/3. When Dremora Adept gains a keyword, you invade. This is a invade card. Nothing more to talk about. It's pretty good in invade, but it basically rewards you for having a high portal. Dres Renegade is up next. This is a 4-cost 4/4 with guard, and it has the effect of other friendly creatures are immune to shackle. This is a very, very interesting card. I think that it's probably great. Just because the effect that it provides is so unique. You don't really see anything like the Dres Renegade um, throughout the rest of Blue, as far as I'm aware. Granting a creature the ability to be immune from an effect in the game is very inherently powerful as is. Um, just kind of like how Nahag is immune to being targeted by actions, or the Hulking Scalon is immune to lethal and immune to shackle. Dres Renegade is going to grant this to all of your creatures, and yes, in case you were wondering, that does include Oblivion portals. The Dres Renegade can unshackle your portal and allow it to attack, which is ridiculous because it says that the Oblivion portal is permanently shackled, but immunity overrides permanent effects like that. It's kind of like how Vivek, like you can die to unite the houses with Vivek on board. Okay, the Dres Tormentor is up next. This is a 4-cost 3/4. When an enemy creature becomes shackled, you deal 3 damage to it. So this is the opposite of the Dres Renegade. This thing is very niche. It belongs in shackle-based assassin decks, essentially, which is an archetype that not many people play, but it's fun. Yeah, he's going to reward you for playing stuff like uh, Winter's Grasp is a great way that Dres Tormentor could be integrated into your play. Um, Very fun card, just not always super consistent there because it relies on you having uh, cards like the Harpy, or even cards like this guy down here, the Ash Piercer. Relies on stuff like that, which you're not always going to have. Dunmer Nightblade. This is a 2/1 for 2 with the last gasp of put an iron sword into your hand. This is solid. I wouldn't say that it's anything higher than solid, but it's just a reliable, consistent early game card, and sometimes that's all that you need, right? Okay, Echo of Akatosh is up next. This is a 6-cost 5/5. When you draw a creature, you give it a random keyword. Now, this is very similar to the Arcane Enchanter. However, I value creatures higher than I value items. So I'm going to put the Echo of Akatosh up into... I think I'm going to put it up into great, actually, because generating random keywords is going to be super, super nice. Now, this is not as good as the Mundus Stone, I would say, because Mundus Stone comes in two... Um, 2 cost sooner and does the same thing basically, uh, except it's when the card is played. So the benefit of Echo of Akatosh is that you know what the keyword is when you get the card into your hand, I suppose. And it's got that 5/5 body, which could be used for killing your opponent, which is cool. But yeah, this is a card that when you put it down, your opponent's going to have to deal with it, or they are going to deal with some extra consequences of your Hulking Scalon having Drain, for example, which nobody wants to deal with. So, yeah, just all in all, a very powerful card. Okay, Elixir of Deflection. This is a 5-cost support with 3 uses, and the activate is that you give a creature a ward. I'm actually going to put this into niche. It's not like this Elixir of Vigor that we talked about before. It's not like that because this card's actually pretty decent. Ward is perhaps the best keyword in the game. Um, and I think that just being able to grant that to any creature 3 times is super cool. I have a ward-based deck on the channel. It's like the second video I ever made on here. Um, well, not ever made, but the second Legends video I did, something like that. And it works very, very effectively in that. The 5 cost you're going to pay to put this down at first is going to hurt, but the ability to consistently generate wards really can make some decks that are going to benefit, like Daggerfall Mage and uh, the Breton Conjurer. It's going to make some decks that have those cards much, much more consistent. Up next, we have the Elixir of Potency. This is a 2 cost support that has 3 uses, and the activate is that you give a creature a random keyword. I think this thing's also good. It's not. It might even be solid, because I don't think you need to be playing. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Oh my God. Okay. It vanished from my sight. It might even be solid though, is what I was saying, because this thing's actually very cheap. You're paying 2 cost and you are immediately going to be able to generate a keyword on one of your cards, which keywords are very, very nice to have. So I don't know. I think it might actually be slightly better just for the value that you're getting compared to the cost. Elixir of Deflection is super good still. I think that it'll probably stay in niche. But yeah, it's giving me something to think about for sure. But Elixir of Potency, I feel pretty good about putting it into solid. I don't play this card myself, but I see people play it a lot, and I totally understand why people would value it in the way that they do. Okay, up next is the Elusive Schemer. Elusive Schemer is a 4-cost 3/1 with the summon effect of draw a card, and then the last gasp effect of shuffle a 0-cost Elusive Schemer into your deck. I think Schemer belongs in Great, just because the stat line's not super insane or anything like that, but it still does a very, very cool thing. So, generating more copies of itself upon death is very interesting. Again, the stat line's not too good, but when it shows up at that 4 cost, it's going to be fine. And it draws a card, which is super nice when you play it. So the draw, the copying, and the decent stat line for the cost is really what makes this card. When it gets silenced, it does feel bad. Nobody really likes that. Sorry if you heard me crack my elbows there, but I'm weird like that. But yeah, the Elusive Schemer is a good card in almost any deck. I think that you can fit this in a lot of different spaces in any kind of combination that's using blue. I always give Elusive Schemer a check to see if it would fit in the deck that I'm making. Okay, Embassy Guard is a 2-cost 0/4 with Prophecy, Guard, and Ward, and I feel like this thing is basically a combo piece for high Hrothgar type decks. I'm not super interested in Embassy Guard ever. The double keywords is nice, but you have to remember you're sitting at 0 attack power for this thing. Now, this could, I suppose, be good in item-based decks because you could equip this thing with a Sentinel Battle Mace, for example. Um, but it has the ward already, so I guess that wouldn't really be a good example. Heavy Battle Axe, I guess you could put on this thing, and it would get some pretty good value right out of the gate. So I don't know. Embassy Guard is it's whatever. It's probably niche, bordering why, but it's got these good keywords here, so I can understand its place perhaps in some kind of decks. Emmerich's Warlord. This is a 2-cost 1/4. The effect of this is that your items have mobilize, and when a friendly recruit equips an item, Emmerich's Warlord gains +1/+0. Oh boy. Technically niche might be why. The effect here is very strange. Your items have mobilize is in theory very cool, but it kind of falls apart when you remember that you have to have no creatures in a lane for mobilize to even work. And then the friendly recruit thing, when a recruit equips an item, Emmerich's Warlord gains +1/+0. That's fine, but it's not like I feel like it's in the wrong colors almost, because a lot of the recruit type decks are going to be Imperials, not which aren't in blue typically. It's going to be like Empire of Cyrodiil type decks that are going to be generating recruits. So Warlord just to me is placed in an odd color, and that's really what's holding her back. I think if she were an Empire card and called like Tullius Warlord or something like that, it might be a little bit better of a card. But Emmerich's Warlord as it stands, not super impressive. Just in general as a card, unfortunately. But I don't know. I it's only a 2 cost and you get the 1/4 body, so I think it's fine. Enamor's Keeper is up next, or Enamor's Keeper. I never know how to pronounce that. It's a 3 cost 4/3 with Exalt 4. When you exalt this card, it equips a +5/+0 Heirloom Greatsword to Enamor's Keeper, making this thing a 9/3. This card is pretty great. The only thing stopping this card is the silence effect. If this card gets silenced, that really sucks because then you lose your Heirloom Greatsword. For anyone who doesn't know, the Heirloom Greatsword, it gets put back into your hand upon the creature who is holding its death, which is very, very cool. And it gives this massive boost in damage to whoever has the Heirloom Greatsword. Just generating that kind of a card on its own is super duper powerful. And yeah, 9/3 for 7 is really not a bad stat line because if your opponent doesn't do something about that, they're about to get kicked in the face with a lot of damage. And if they do take care of it, the sword gets regenerated. So they just have to be constantly on the lookout after that, which is very nice to see. Okay, the Evermore Steward is next. This is a 2 cost 1/1 with Guard and Ward, and I am going to put him into Solid. I like this card. I think it's fallen out of play a little bit in the past few years of Legends, but I think that it's just a reliable early game card, which is the same thing that I said about Dunmer Nightblade, and you need those kinds of cards in the game in order to have a successful early game. A little bit defensive, but that's why the card is there. If you want a more defensive early game, that is totally fine. Okay, Excavate is up next. This is a 3 cost action, and it allows you to draw an item or support from your discard pile. This, I believe, is the only way to get a support out of your discard pile. I'm going to put it in great for that reason alone, because it is the only card that does the thing that it does. I don't think that it's always going to be super great, but I would feel weird putting this anywhere lower than great, because supports are meant to be, used and thrown away most of the time. Like College of Winterhold, you're meant to get your uses out of it and say goodbye. So if you can bring something like that back, that is very incredible. And then being able to draw an item, I like that this has utility here too. It's not just for supports, it's for items as well. So let's say that you do lose your Heirloom Greatsword, you could pull it back with Excavate, and then your opponent has a big problem. You could pull back a Dragon Priest Mask or a Poison Dagger or a Daedric Dagger or Daedric Crescent or whatever. It's a card that has a lot of utility just based on what you've played previously in the game. Okay, this is my boy, the Falling Wizard. This is a 2 cost 5/5 creature with the summon effect of Falling Wizard deals 5 damage to himself. Then the last gasp effect of put an experimental scroll into your hand. This might be my bias showing, but I'm going to put this guy into Solid. I almost put him into Great. The only thing with this card is that uh, it's going to kill itself when it gets played. However, there are ways around that. If you have one Divine Fervor out, Falling Wizard will not kill himself. If you have, where did I put my boy? The Lion Guard Strategist down, Falling Wizard will not kill himself. The 5 damage will be absorbed. And then you've played just two Magicka for a 5/5 creature, which is crazy, with the last gasp effect of putting an experimental scroll in your hand. The experimental scroll can either give every one of your creatures, I believe, 2 keywords, which is probably the best one that you can get. It can either deal 5 damage to both players, or it can deal 1 damage to everything. I believe those are the 3 effects of the experimental scroll, and it's random. You don't know what you're going to get when you play it. So the Falling Wizard is a lot of fun. He can potentially have a ton of power and health for you in the early game if you've set up for it. And yeah, he's just a lot of fun. The only thing is consistency with this guy. It takes a lot of setup for him, but I think in most cases, even the experimental scroll is going to be fun to play with. So you might as well just put him in solid. I think that he provides a lot of different avenues to jump off from. And he's one of my favorite cards because he's very, very goofy. Okay, the Farsight Nereid. 3/3 for 3 with the summon effect of reveal the top card of your opponent's deck. I think this thing's fine. It's not bound to any one deck in particular. And it's always nice to know what the top card of your opponent's deck is because that'll tell you whether or not you can hit them without breaking a prophecy for one of their runes. So Farsight Nereid gives you insight into what your opponent is doing, and that is valuable game knowledge to have. Fate Weaver is another Nereid card. It's a 6-cost 3/3 with the prophecy effect of summon, draw a card. If it's a prophecy, you may play it for free. I think this thing definitely is niche. It belongs in like prophecy assassin, prophecy battle mage type things, which isn't a bad thing. Its stat line on its own, not great, but it's doing a similar thing that the Alfiq Conjurer did. It's in fact the same stat line. So the Alfiq Conjurer summons a card, and depending on how much that card is worth, that's how much you can judge the value of the cost that you played. Fate Weaver is going to be drawing a prophecy. Well, it can draw a prophecy, and if it draws a prophecy from the card that you drew, you may play it for free. So it's going to be dependent on what prophecies are in the game, what prophecies are in your deck, and if it even draws that at all. So it's conditional, much more conditional than the Alfiq Conjurer, I would say. Okay, Fingers of the Mountain. This is a 6-cost action, and it costs 1 less for each action you've played this turn. I'm putting this up in Amazing. You deal 1 damage to a creature, deal 2 damage to a creature, and deal 3 damage to a creature, all in different bursts. Very, very cool card, especially if you have played other things to make this thing have less cost. It's actually a feature of this card that I forget about quite a bit. Fingers of the Mountain deals 6 damage, just split between different bursts, which allows you very strategically to pick what kind of cards you want to kill on your field, on the opponent's field. Let's say that they have, just looking at cards here, if they have a Morag Tong Aspirant, a Daring Cutpurse, and a Murkwater Shaman all on the board at the same time, you use the first blast to kill the Morag Tong Aspirant, second blast to kill the Daring Cutpurse, and the third one to kill the Murkwater Shaman. It's much more valuable than just having a flat 6 damage that you throw at one creature, like Spirit Knife with the 7 damage, which is still a good card, but I digress. Fingers of the Mountain allows you to choose what your damage breakup is going to be, and so long as you're good at math, this is one of the best removal spells in the game. And definitely one of the best ones in blue. Okay, Firebolt is up next. You will deal 2 damage to a creature when you play this 1-cost action. And I think that this thing's just, it's solid. It's a very reliable card. I was saying earlier, it's one of the better kind of little actiony things you can do. And getting 1 for free with Cunning Ally is very nice, but just throwing some in your deck just to have some very basic removal is super cool. And especially, I'm going to pick on this card again. When we look down, and I'm just doing this to show you my rationale. When we look down at Ash Servant, he's essentially got Firebolt on hand, but you're paying essentially 2 extra cost than what you would be for just playing like let's say that we have a Daggerfall Mage for 3 cost, and then we just want to throw a Firebolt in our deck. I think that's a better use of your 4 Magicka than having 1 Ash Servant that's a 2/2 for 4 that throws a Firebolt as well. So that's just more Ash Servant slander. But anyway, I think Firebolt is pretty good where it's at. It's a solid card. It's not doing anyone any harm. Fire Breath is up next. This is a 3-cost action. It's a shout. You deal 2 damage to a creature with the first one. You deal 4 damage with the next one, and then you deal 10 damage with the next one. I think this card's good. It's a lot better than the Dragon's Fury, I would say, and the 10 damage one can be comboed really effectively with with Ancano. So I'm going to put it up into solid. I think that it's a decent choice. It's not bound to dragon type decks. Shouts are not bound to be played in dragon type decks, obviously. So I think that for what it is, it's actually pretty good. It's a very decent removal option, and it allows you to kind of think a little bit about when you're going to be playing the different versions of it. I quite like it. I think it's fun. Firestorm. This is a 4-cost action with the prophecy effect of deal 2 damage to all creatures in a lane. Firestorm's also pretty good. I think that it's, again, not as effective as it once was in the game's life cycle when creatures had a little bit less health than they do now, but it's still good. So Firestorm's kind of one of the OGs, and you got to respect it for that. The prophecy's really cool, and it basically just throws a bunch of firebolts all throughout the lane. Now, it's all creatures in a lane, so it will damage friendly creatures, but there are ways that that could, potentially benefit you if you're playing some kind of uh, wounded based list like Battle Mage with Fighters Guild Hall maybe, or I guess Fighters Guild Hall wouldn't work on this, but I don't know. There's potentially ways to make that 2 damage not so bad. Last Gasp type decks might benefit from that. Okay, Forces of Destruction. This is a 10-cost action with Invade as its primary function, and then you summon random Daedra with total cost 10. So what this means is that you're going to point this at a lane, and it's going to summon a random number of Daedra into that lane to try to fill it with 10 cost worth of Daedra. A very interesting thing that you can do with this card is, and this is why it goes as high as it does, you can instantly summon the one guy. Let me try to find him really quick. I think it's a Dremora Markinaz is what it's called. Um, yep, the Dremora Markinaz. So this is a 10 cost Daedra here, and if you only have one space in a lane, you can actually instantly summon that guy every single time by just pointing this thing up against the wall and using that empty space because it's going to try to get a total of 10 cost, right? So getting the Dremora Markinaz for just a 10 cost action instead of putting it in your deck is super cool because that card's very good. So that's specifically why it's great, but also just generating a bunch of value from Daedra, which are already very decent cards. Is not bad at all. They can be from any color, so this can also work pretty well with Unite type decks if you wanted to try to play that. But yeah, I think it's a fun card. It provides a lot of different utility, and it doesn't just have to be used in Invade. Forked Bolt is a 0-cost action that deals 1 damage to a creature and your opponent. Don't have a problem with this at all. I think it's decent. We'll call it a cantrip because I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate. It's a decent cantrip for you to throw into your deck. And yeah, I mean, it's not super powerful, but it's not unplayable or anything like that. It does its job. It's meant for the early game, and that's kind of where it's played. Okay, Frazzled Alfiq. Also, it works with Swindler's Market, obviously, because it's a 0-cost. Frazzled Alfiq is a 2-cost 1/2 with the Wax ability of deal 1 damage and the Wane ability of +1/+1. After you play another card waxed, you deal 1 damage, and after you play another card waned, you gain +1/+1. I think the Frazzled Alfiq is probably niche. I don't play a whole lot with Wax Wane cards because I just typically am not a big fan of Khajiit. Unfortunately, might bother some people watching, but it is what it is. I don't really like Khajiit all that much, so I don't really play Wax Wane. Um, but yeah, this card seems like it could be powerful in a snowbally sense if you do draw a bunch of your Wax Wane creatures with something like Moongate. Um, I could see this thing easily getting out of hand. But as it stands right now, I think that it's probably just meant for those types of decks, so that will put it into niche for me. Okay, Gardener of Swords. We're gonna put him up into. I'm gonna throw him into Great. I don't quite think that he's S. I don't think that he goes all the way up there, but that's just because he's a victim of being in item decks. So he already has this 1/1 stat line, which is horrible. He costs 3, which is fine. His effect is really good though. So when you equip an item to another creature, you equip a copy of it to Gardener of Swords. Gardener of Swords goes crazy with telekinesis. It is one of the most ridiculous things you can do. I have a whole deck on my channel based around a Gardener of Swords combo that you can do with a whole bunch of different creatures involved, and it's very fun. On his own, he is a great card. He provides double value for any action or for any item that you play. And if you are good at just like placement of items and figuring out what you need to do on your turn and who needs what, the Gardener can easily OTK your opponent in just a few turns of proper play. However, um, when he's silenced, he's completely useless. He's left as this just flat 1/1 body that you paid 3 magicka for and put a bunch of time investments in. So you really want to make sure that you've got like a loot on this guy or an Ebon Thread Cloak when you put him out. So he's a little bit dependent on his um, starting placement, I suppose is how I would put that. He's very dependent on that, and he's very dependent on what your opponent has in their hand. If they've got something like a Javelin, um, to just take him out immediately, that's really going to suck because if you're playing with Gardener of Swords, chances are you're trying to get that combo to go off, and that's one less card in your whole deck that's going to be able to do that. So just think about that whenever you play Gardener of Swords. He's a very high priority card that most people will take out as soon as he's played. Up next, we have the Gardener's Harvest, which is a 1-cost item, +1/+1 naturally. And then at the end of your turn, if Gardener's Harvest is in your hand, it changes into a random item and keeps this ability. This card's always been kind of like why for me, I suppose. I would never say that it's unplayable because any kind of random item that you get can potentially be good. I just don't really think that it's worth putting in your deck most of the time. You're going to know what items that you want to have in your deck, and while it could be cool to generate a Daedric Dagger in item Battle Mage or something like that, it's not really that necessary. I don't know though. I guess nobody uses this thing. I'm just going to keep it in Y. It's a good thing, too, that they didn't make Gardener of Swords a dual card with this, though something tells me that they probably wanted to at first. But Gardener on its own is just such a good card. Okay, the Genius Pathmage is up next, which is a card I haven't seen anybody use in forever, but it's a 7-cost 4/4 with the summon effect of summon a random creature from your deck with cost equal to your current magicka. Very, very interesting card. I'm going to put it up into great, actually. I don't ever see anyone play with this, but that is because it is a gigantic Giga Brain card that you need to like really know your deck to play well. If you are able to get a Genius Pathmage out on turn 12, you will be able to instantly draw um, a random 5-cost creature from your deck. That card could be a doppelganger, which is pretty funny. And then you could doppelganger your Genius Pathmage and draw every doppelganger from your deck on one turn to get a bunch of value from that, which is just, I don't know, it's pretty fun. Um, but yeah, you could potentially that's a thing that could happen. But yeah, if you really know your deck very well, this card can get you anything that you want. Especially in singleton type lists when you really know what's at your 5-drop and what's at your 6-drop and stuff like that. If you're ramping and you play this thing on turn 19, you will always get a 12-drop, which is pretty cool. And yeah, it can just be used to tutor out very specific cards. So I don't think that the stat line makes it go up into amazing, but it is, like I said, a very alpha-brained card that you have to know your deck very well to get maximum value out of. Ghostseed Lookout. Thank God I can finally put one of the lookouts in Y. I don't even know why you would run this in dragon type decks. So it's a 4/2 for 3, and it's when you summon a dragon, Ghostseed Lookout gains a ward. Who was smoking the crack pipe? Who was smoking the skooma pipe when they made this one? Every other lookout, I would say, in this game is pretty good, except this one. This one only buffs itself, and not even in a very effective way. Ghostseed Lookout can be killed by so many different things. With that 4/2 stat line, it's not really getting much value from just being played, unlike the Camlorn Hero, which is the same stat line for cost. It's just instantly going to be doing that 2 damage to your opponent. So when we compare it to creatures of identical cost and value, I don't think that it's really doing the same thing that those are. And even in its own deck, even in dragon type decks, I would rather play something other than the Ghost Sea Lookout. Um, in fact, I'd rather not play dragons in blue, to be honest with you at all. They're really more of like spell sword or empire type things that I feel like people get the most value out of. Um, warrior, but just like intelligence, it's not really a color for dragons that I've ever seen it as anyway. Okay, Ghostgate Defender is up next. This is a one cost 1/3 with guard, and the exalt is that you deal 2 damage to a creature. So if you exalt this, you're paying basically a 3 cost for a 1/3, and you're getting to do that extra 2 damage to something. So you're basically summoning a firebolt. I don't mind the Ghostgate Defender. I think that it is a bit niche. It being a one cost for 1/3 with guard, though, is not bad, especially if you're just not going to exalt this. Like, that's fine. You just have a very beefy guard now. But there's typically better things I would say that you could run. If you want a 1/3 in the early game, you can just play the Altmer Flameslinger. You won't get it out on turn 1, but hey, that's life. Um, yeah, it's good. But again, it probably wants to get value from some of your other Tribunal Exalt type cards. Okay, Glacial Dragon is a 6 cost for 3, and it's up next. It's got Shackle, enemy creatures damaged by friendly dragons. The summon effect is that you deal 2 damage to a creature. So you will instantly deal some damage and you will shackle a creature with this thing. I think I'm going to put it up into solid. It's not like completely blowing my mind when I look at that initially. Again, you are watching a video of a guy who never ever plays dragons, so I don't typically use this thing. But as far as dragons go, it's not that abrasive to me. However, it is another one of these cards that gives more value to dragons. It totally buffs all dragons because it's any enemy creature that's damaged by a friendly dragon will now be shackled. It doesn't have to be the glacial dragon. And it counts itself in that as well with the deal 2 damage to creatures thing. So you're instantly going to shackle something, deal some damage to it, and now you have a 4/5 body for 6 that buffs all of your other dragons in your deck. So although I just said that intelligence is not really a color that I associate with dragons, I do think that this enables it to be, which is pretty cool if you're into that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't think that it's specifically niche because I think that you could get some value with this outside of just a dragon based deck, but you're definitely going to want to play other dragons with it. Okay, the Glenumbra Sorceress is up next. It's a 5 cost 5/1 with Ward. I think this thing's actually pretty decent. It's solid. It's just there to be super aggressive and intimidating. It's not too easy, or it's not too hard to take out. You could take it out with a forked bolt, but it does have that ward, right? So you got to get through the ward first, and then you can deal some damage to actually kill it. But on turn 5, I think a 5/1 with a very powerful protective keyword is serving a similar function to how a 5/5 would normally function, right? Rather than just using a 5 magic of piercing javelin to get rid of this, they're being forced to expend either the same piercing javelin that they would for a 5/5, or they're forced to do like a firebolt and a forked bolt, in which case they'd be down more material than you because they spent 2 cards to take out your 1 card. So interesting stuff to think of. Okay, up next is the Gnarl Rootbender. This is a 5 cost 5/4, and he's got the effect of when an action targets Gnarl Rootbender, you draw a card. This thing is pretty insane with Swindler's Market. This thing's pretty insane just in general. I think that it's actually a pretty great card. It's probably undervalued by a lot of people, I think. If you're looking for a card to fill your 5 slot, this is not a bad option for you. The utility that it provides with drawing a card anytime that it's targeted by an action is pretty cool. You could target it with probably Tinkering. I'm not sure about that. But Cruel Firebloom, I believe, works on this thing. If you need to last ditch sacrifice it, you'll still draw a card, I believe. You could target it, I think, with Fingers of the Mountain as well. Cards that I am sure work on it, though, are like Shadow Shift or Forked Bolt or Curse. Any of that kind of stuff can work on this thing, and you'll be generating more cards. And yeah, it's just a fun time in general. Very cool card. And obviously, if your opponent javelins you or edicts you or something, you will draw a card from that as well. Okay. Gout Fang Adept is a 4-cost 2/4 with the wax effect of draw a card and the wane effect of +1/+1 and guard. Again, we're looking at a card that's probably better than the Ash Servant or the Ash Piercer. If you do the wane on this, it gains the same or a better stat line actually than the Ash Piercer for a lower cost. And if you do the Wax, it gains a much better stat line than the or it is a much better stat line than the Ash Servant, but it's also drawing you a card. So I think that this thing has some utility. It doesn't just belong in Wax Wayne type decks like the Frazzled Alfiq does, in my opinion, but I think that it provides some decent value. The 2/4 for 4 is not my favorite thing in the world, but you could sacrifice that little bit of attack power for draw in that case, and I think that that's fine. Okay, Grave Grasp, 4-cost action with Prophecy. The action effect is that you shackle an enemy creature. Then you summon a 1/1 skeleton for each enemy creature in its lane. This thing has its place, specifically with the Dres Renegade, I think is probably where this would work better. But I think just in general, I'm going to put this in Y. I don't really ever want to use Grave Grasp. I don't think that it's unplayable. So far, we haven't had an unplayable, but I don't really think it's that good either. I'd rather just play like uh, Harpy. I'd rather just play a Harpy if I want to shackle something. I don't need all the extra added effects of like summoning skeletons and, you know, the skeletons aren't really going to do all that much anyway. So while I suppose if you're playing this card and you're shackling a creature that's in a lane with 3 other creatures, you would generate 4 skeletons. So you would shackle something and then gain 4 creatures, which I suppose is where the 4 cost comes from this. But it's a little bit conditional and it's just not it's not really all that great, if I'm being honest. Okay, Guildsworn Wayfarer is up next, and this is a 2/2 for 2 with the expertise of +1/+1. I think this thing's pretty good. It doesn't just belong in expertise type decks. Every deck is going to have some amount of actions normally. So the Guildsworn Wayfarer has a high chance of at least getting, just a +1/+1 for doing very minimal work if you were to shoot a firebolt or a forked bolt or a lightning bolt or something like that, any kind of bolt, the Guildsworn Wayfarer would buff itself up a bit just for you dealing damage. And even if you don't have one of those, a 2/2 for 2 is not bad. So it's another one of those early game cards. It can ramp pretty effectively, but um, yeah, I don't know. I don't have that much more to say. Okay, Hannibal Traven is up next. He's a 7-cost 5/5. After you play an action, Hannibal Traven learns it. Then the last gasp is that you play all learned actions from your discard pile. So while Hannibal is good, I'm going to keep him out of S tier. The reason for this is just because of the last gasp and the high cost. He's not always going to have a chance to accumulate that many actions. In fact, most of the time I would say he's going to get one action off and then someone's going to Edict of Azura this guy, which is fine. You're still going to regain access to the action that he learned, which is good. But I think just in most cases, he's not really like going to be around for that long. The 7-cost action prevents you from playing a lot of the actions that you might want to duplicate with Hannibal, like Forces of Destruction would be insane to duplicate with Hannibal. 8-cost Whodunit you can't do, but most of the time you'll be able to. Fresh Start would be insane with Hannibal. Fingers of the Mountain would be insane with Hannibal. Ultimate Heist would be insane with Hannibal, but a lot of these cards are blockaded because of that 7 cost that he has. So I think that all in all, he's a very powerful card in the right hands. You just have to wait a turn typically before he really gets going, and that's where he's most likely to die. And he's one of these cards that you'll probably have in your hand for a long time, waiting for the right opportunity to use him. So he can kind of be dead weight at some point because you really want to make sure you're getting value from a card like this when you play it. He's not like Abner, that's immediately going to do something when they go down, and Kano, Devaith, Odinir and Necromancer. All these cards are immediately going to do something when they go down, or they're just extremely, extremely intimidating. And I don't think that Hannibal is always going to be extremely, extremely intimidating, although he is one of the best cards in the game still. I will stand by that. Hatchery Meddler. This is a 4-cost creature with a 5/3 stat line, and the summon effect is that you swap a creature's power and health. This guy, I'm going to put him in great. I think he's very heavily slept on. There's some cards up here that I've had maybe some hot takes on. I feel like the Indomitable Ordinator is a great example of a card that's very slept on. Trez Renegade is kind of another version of that. Moon Touched Guardian might be another version that some people don't understand why is up here. Um, Maybe the Blighted Werebat, I don't know. But I think that this is another card that's like, this has a lot of potential. The 4-3 stat line, or sorry, the 5-3 stat line for 4 is pretty decent. And the summon effect of swap a creature's power and health, that can completely neuter some cards. Like, let's say that you're playing with the, where did we just talk about that at? The Glenumbra Sorceress. If you flip that creature's power and health, it's now just stupid. It's a 1/5 with Ward, which is just dumb to look at. Some other examples of great ways you can use this are like the Zivkin Banelord. I forget where I put that guy. But he is a 1/7. If you flip his stat line, he becomes a 7/1, and then he just takes 1 arrow to the knee to kill. So, very creative kind of card, very tricky card. But if you know how to use this thing effectively, putting 3 of them in your deck could be a good option for you, and I think that it would be a lot of fun too. Especially when you start getting like Dragon Priest masks and um, resummon effects like Abner and Dark Rebirth and all that kind of stuff. If you were to do that with the Hatchery Meddler and just completely mess up your opponent's whole field, I think that'd be super, super funny. Okay, up next we have the Heirloom Greatsword. So you do not have to play Enamor's Keeper to get this thing. You can just default put it into your deck. And I think this is one of the better items that you can have in the game. I will also put this thing up into Great. I think that this is one of the better items. The Last Gasp is really saving this thing. The fact that it returns to your hand after the death of the creature holding it is really, really nice. It's like the saving grace for this thing. It's this looming threat once you put it down that your opponent is always going to have to be aware of. Like every creature you put down, even like a Treeminder, has the potential to be a 6 damage creature because of this Heirloom Greatsword. So yeah, the constant power threat really adds another layer of like mind game to the match that you're in whenever this thing goes down. And I'm a little bit disappointed. I don't think I've played this thing on the channel yet. So maybe that should be something that we do in the future is a item deck coming up. But yeah, Heirloom Greatsword's a lot of fun. High Rock Summoner, this is the card that I was talking about earlier when we were mentioning the Elfique Conjurer. This is a 2-cost 1/1, and it has the summon effect of put a random Atronach into your hand. High Rock Summoner is just a good card. It's very solid in the early game, and I don't think that I can put it in the same tier as a lot of these great cards up top that really change the match. But this is going to give you either a Flame Atronach, Frost Atronach, or Storm Atronach, which are all really good cards that can be played pretty much after High Rock Summoner goes down. I mean, it's going to be a little bit for the Storm and the Frost Atronach, but like the Flame Atronach, you can play pretty much right away after this thing. So it curves out nicely into whatever card that it summons. And I think that it's a good thing to have. Okay, Ice Spike. This is a 2-cost action that deals 2 damage to your opponent and you draw a card. I'm going to put Ice Spike into Great. I do love this card. I don't think that it fits in with the Amazing tier up here. So what this thing does is well, I just read what it does, but it allows you to keep up tempo by drawing a card and also by dealing face damage. Now again, are you always going to want to be dealing damage when you're drawing a card? Not always. Sometimes this thing can screw you over because it can break your opponent's rune. They hit a prophecy, and that's a game-changing prophecy sometimes. So you really want to know when a good time to use this is. Typically, the early game Ice Spike is really good, or the late game because it can push extra damage to get your opponent down into lethal range, or it can actually just kill your opponent and give you lethal, which is super cool. And while it does have a lot of utility, I think that it just is not like as powerful as a lot of these ones up here. It's kind of the same spiel that I had with Hannibal. Really good card, doesn't quite push into that upper echelon as some of these other ones do. Like Shadow Shift also does something and draws a card, but it's more sneaky, right? It's like a sneak around because move is very unpredictable. So that's where I think that Shadow Shift kind of shines ahead of Ice Spike, just to give an example there. Although in the right deck, Ice Spike can be on the same tier as any of these other ones. It's a very good card. And then there's of course my my Thorana Ice Spike Dream where I don't damage my opponent for the entire match. I play one Ice Spike, it shuffles in, and then I only draw Ice Spikes for the rest of the game, and I get an OTK. That's my dream. If I do that, I think I can quit. I can quit Legends. I can just, start a farm somewhere and live a simple life. Okay, up next we have Ice Storm. I just took a drink of water, so hopefully my voice will stop uh, being weird. Ice Storm is a 6-cost action that deals 3 damage to all creatures. Again, I will put this into Great. There's not a whole lot of cards that can just deal a ton of damage to everything all at once. So this is one of the OG board wipes in the game, and it's very effective at that. One Ice Storm is not going to kill everything at this higher echelon, right? But if we actually look at a lot of our S tier cards, Bandari, Corner Club, Fighters Guild, Raz, Viper is always going to be dead the turn that it goes down, but Thieves Guild, Ungolem, Ald-Valathi, Barrow, Galen, a lot of these cards are going to die to Ice Storm, and your opponent half the time's not expecting their entire board to be wiped like that. So including 2 or 3 of these in any of your blue decks can kind of be very effective. Just know that in blue specifically, it is going to kill a lot of your creatures too. It's going to kill your Schemers, it's going to kill your Enamor's Keeper, your Hatchery Meddler, probably your Gardener of Swords. You just need to know what kind of deck you're putting this into before you put it into it and know what you're getting into. With that said, though, Ice Storm is a very good card, and any kind of board wipe is going to be valuable in some way. Okay, so the Icewing Dragon here. This is interesting. It's a 6-cost, 6/4 with the summon effect of Shackle an enemy creature. Now I'm going to go back to Dova of the Voice here. Okay? So, Dova of the Voice. Oh, I can't put them right next to each other, can I? I'm going to move some cards around. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Dova of the Voice. Icewing Dragon is like your cooler intelligence brother. Because, man, the art is so similar here, too. That's kind of unfortunate. Icewing Dragon, though, is also a 6/4, but it costs 1 less, and it has a summon effect instead of a last gasp. So you're immediately getting value from this, whereas Dova of the Voice, you could potentially get no value if it gets summoned, or silenced. Icewing Dragon, though, the summon effect is that you shackle an enemy creature. As we've seen, Shackle has a lot of cards that combo with it, actually, which you wouldn't quite think at first, but it does have quite a few that combo with it. And I think that Icewing Dragon, it can be played outside of Dragon-type decks. It's a fine card. Combos well with Glacial Dragon. The stat line is not too bad for the cost. It's no, where did I put it? It must be in Great. Spine of Elder's Blood. It must be in Great. It's no Spine of Elder's Blood, but it is still a pretty decent dragon, and being able to shackle something just totally halts momentum in a game. So I think that it could be a decent choice if you're looking for some card to fill your 6 slot if you are playing with 6-drop cards at all. Ice Wraith is up next. This is a 4-cost 2/2. At the start of your turn, put an Ice Spike into your hand. So we just talked about how Ice Spike is a great card, and I think that I would put Ice Wraith also into Great. So again, I'm gonna pick on the Ash Servant because I think that the stat line is it's not for me, guys. It's okay if you play with it, it's just not for me. So 4-cost 2/2, right? Let's look at the difference in these cards because this can be an instructional learning moment. Ice Wraith is intimidating because the longer that it goes down, the more value you are going to generate. You're going to be getting cards that are going to be able to deal damage and draw at the same time. Ash Servant deals 2 damage to a creature. And even cards like Ash Servant that are meant for the early game like that, there's better options. Ice Wraith, we're going to go back up top, fits in very nicely with the theme of our top cards of having some kind of threat that they present, or having some kind of board-altering state that they present, or being very powerful. Ice Wraith fits in nicely with something like the Lion Guard Strategist for me, where the longer that these two are out, the more value they're going to project onto the board state. The longer that Lion Guard Strategist is out, the more creatures you have to deal with that will have wards on them. The longer that Ice Wraith is out, the more Ice Spikes will be generated. It's a very simple thing to understand for most people watching, I'm sure, but I just like explaining a little bit extra sometimes on why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. So Ice Wraith sits in great. It doesn't fit into amazing because you have to have this thing alive for an entire turn. Um, so, take that as you will. But if you get a few of these out and they can survive, um, they're they're typically very good to have out. Okay, Icy Shambles. This is a 4-cost 2/3 shackle creatures damaged by Icy Shambles. And then the summon effect is that you deal 2 damage to a creature. This is the same thing that the Glacial Dragon does, but you can't. You can't. It, Glacial Dragon specifically meant for dragon decks. Icy Shambles costs 2 less and does the same thing. I think this thing is actually better than the Glacial Dragon because of its lower cost and just general more utility. I've mentioned Quicksilver Crossbow a lot throughout this series. If you have a Quicksilver Crossbow on your Icy Shambles, it can deal extra damage and shackle something as well. So it's a cool effect. Deals that 2 damage. I'm not going to go back down to the Ash Servant, but deals 2 damage to a creature while having a better stat line and a better effect. So I would give it a thumbs up. I think it's pretty great. Okay, Imbued Breton. This is a 5-cost 4/4 with Ward, and when Imbued Breton is consumed, you give the consuming creature +1/+1 and Ward. I don't have a problem with this. I think a lot of the Imbued cards are pretty good. This thing's not going to be on the same level probably as our Imbued Bosmer was. I can't remember where I put the Imbued Bosmer. Similar level, but not the same. So, and I'll mention that because the imbued Argonian right here. All of the imbued cards are pretty decent. So the imbued Argonian is it's going to give your cards just a little bit of a buff with the +1/+1 in guard, whereas imbued Bosmer is going to give your cards a +1/+1 with ward when consumed. So they actively have a 4/4 for 5 with ward, which is a good stat line in and of itself, and they give an effect afterwards if you're using consume cards. So it's just nice to have that option there, and I mean, your opponent's probably not going to expect you to run this. It's not anything too crazy, but it's also just kind of a fun card to play around with. I really enjoy those imbued consume cards. I think they're a lot of fun. Okay, Indoril Archmage is up next. This is a 8-cost 6/6, and this dude is like the poster child for Legends, or he was for a while anyway. He's got Guard, and his last gasp is that he deals 6 damage to all enemy creatures in this lane. I'm going to put him into Great. I think that he's really good. He's basically Devaith Fear if Devaith couldn't damage your opponent's face. Now, I feel like if Archmage has Breakthrough, maybe that 6 damage would turn into face damage. That's something I would like to see tested at some point. But yeah, Indoril Archmage essentially works as a board wipe, but only for one specific lane. And he's not quite like Dawn's Wrath level, where he'll instantly destroy everything, but 6 damage is typically enough to kill most creatures in this game, so his last gasp is really good. He can be comboed together with the Necrom Mastermind very well, but unlike the Necrom Mastermind, he's not bound to that deck to be useful. So Indoril, I would give a thumbs up. I think it comes down at a good spot too. 8 cost for a 6/6 guard is pretty reasonable, especially with a last gasp effect that's so loaded like that. Insightful Scholar is up next. This is a 5-cost 2/3 with Prophecy. The summon is that you draw a card for each card your opponent drew this turn. I wouldn't quite call this unplayable, but I really, really hate the stat line to cost ratio. I get that it's a prophecy, so it can be pulled from stuff like the Fate Weaver. I understand that that's part of the balance with this card, I believe, but I really, really don't like it. Because playing this raw would feel so bad unless you've done a ton of damage to your opponent. This feels to me like a card that you would put in like a burn battle mage, I guess, if that's a thing where you just want to like tear through your deck and damage your opponent as much as possible. To have them draw a bunch of runes, right? But this thing's going to get diminishing value the more runes that your opponent has broken. I feel like there's some kind of thing you could do with this with we can probably see him down here, right? Somewhere. My perception is is not super good when it comes to this list. There's a card that'll make you draw 2 cards though, and like you and your opponent will both draw 2 cards. I can't remember where he's at, but the Insightful Scholar is could potentially be comboed with that to give you some extra draw. But other than that, I don't really think that there's a whole lot of options for this thing to be really that great. So at your 5-drop slot, honestly, you're probably better off even doing Court Wizard and just building a deck around that than using the Insightful Scholar, in my opinion. Invasion Vanguard. This is a 2-cost 1/4. It is niche because it is strictly an invade card. However, in invade, it's pretty decent. So this was something that I was ranting about in my most recent video a little bit about why invade is a bit unbalanced in my eyes. And that's the fact that this card is a Daedra itself, and it has a effect that buffs other Daedra. Unlike the Goblin cards that we've seen before, like the... Oh, where is it? Man, I'm going to have to look around for this. Yeah, Murkwater Skirmisher. This is a great example. 4/4 for 4. Summon. Give all other friendly goblins +2/+2. This is going to buff your other goblins. Okay. The thing with Invasion Vanguard is that it's going to buff the Oblivion Portal, which is going to buff Daedra, which is going to buff the Invasion Vanguard. It's like a cyclical cycle. So the Daedra buff the portal, and the portal buffs the Daedra. If I were to design invade myself, I would make every single card, or damn near every single card that invades, not a Daedra. That way they're not buffing themselves, because that, I think, is where the real problem comes in. So, Invasion Vanguard, when the portal reaches level 3, I believe, all Daedra that are summoned after that are going to be gaining a +1/+1 to their stat line. So really, and that's not hard to do, really what you want to think of this card as is when the portal is at level 3. This is a 2-cost 2/5, which is a stat line I can't really match to anything else in the game. I can't think of something that has that. Maybe the Dark Guardian has a 2/5, right? But yeah, you're going up with Dark Guardian level status for just playing a 2-cost creature, potentially with like 5 keywords, depending on how far your portal is along, and that can be a difficult creature to get rid of, because 5 cost doesn't die to Lightning Bolt, doesn't die to with the 2 power, doesn't die to Fell the Mighty, does die to Execute and that kind of stuff, but yeah, Invasion Vanguard just kind of sits with me in this weird spot where I don't like how buffed up it can get at such an early rate, and I don't like the fact that it buffs itself. I think that it's a little bit annoying. Okay, up next we have J'zargo. J'zargo's a 4-cost 3/4 with the summon effect of put an experimental scroll into your hand. I'm making the executive decision to put J'zargo in solid, because the 3/4 stat line, yes, it's not great. But you are generating an experimental scroll as well as a summon ability, whereas the Falling Wizard is basically just putting an experimental scroll into your hand in most cases for 2. In this one, you're getting the experimental scroll without having to pay 2 cost. That's an added bonus of the card. For a unique legendary, it's not a very good card. But if these were normal, like 4-drop cards, and you could put 3 of them in your deck, I don't know if it would be overpowered, but it would certainly be like I don't know. It would be interesting to see. It's a world I want to live in. But yeah, so J'zargo, he's fun. He's a good reference to a fun character, and the experimental scroll has the potential to really turn the tides in a game sometimes. So I'm actually all for J'zargo. I think that he's not anything too crazy, but he's a solid choice if you're just looking for a unique card to fill your 4-drop. Might as well put J'zargo in there, I guess, if you're playing intelligence. It's not going to hurt your deck. Okay. Keeper of Whispers. This is a 3-cost 3/4. Other friendly creatures are immune to silence. I really desperately need to start using this card. The only problem with this card, and I've talked about this before, I'm going to say this card's maybe great just because that effect is really good, but there's one card that ruins this card, and that's Mute. God damn it. So the thing with Mute, and why I had somebody in my comments saying that this card, they were like, really? You said that Mute is good? Yeah, I think Mute is insane. The thing with this card is that even if you have a Keeper of Whispers down, you could mute with the first silence the Keeper of Whispers, and then you could silence Hannibal Traven or something like that. This card completely bypasses the card that's supposed to bypass silence. So I think that's why Mute, another reason why Mute is very good in my eyes. So you would actually need two of these down to lock your opponent out of silencing you. I think that that is a very powerful effect because silence in and of itself is a very, very powerful effect. So Keeper of Whispers gets a thumbs up for me, and we're going to keep on chugging along. Khajiit Warhelm is next. It's a 2-cost item with a +1/+3 stat line, and the summon effect is that the wielder deals 1 damage to your opponent. So this can be cool if you have it on a creature with Drain because you'll be gaining +1 health from that because it's the wielder that deals the damage to your opponent, not the helmet itself. I think that this is a solid item. It doesn't fly much higher than solid for me, but as far as items go, it's pretty good. It actually gives you a lot of defense, a little bit of attack power, and it gains you that little bit of utility with the 1 damage, which can be used for empower type decks, or it could be used to just kill your opponent or get them down to lethal range. Whatever the effect that you're going for is, Khajiit Warhelm is a pretty good option. Okay, Laneth is up next. This is a 9-cost 6/6 with the summon effect of draw a card of choice from your deck. I think this, god damn it, gotta go grab her again. I think this card, okay, come on. I think that this card easily flies into S tier. The ability to choose whatever card you want from your deck can be insanely clutch in dire moments, or it can just be super nice to like get out your Siege of Stros Micaiah if you're playing Singleton. You know, you can pull that out whenever you want. You can pull out a Mushroom Tower. You can pull out a Hall of Death Priest. You can pull out the Ultimate Heist. Anything that you want, Laneth can get you. And the fact that she's in blue is pretty good too, because blue is one of the most powerful colors, I would say, in my own opinion. So I think that she's got a lot of good cards to pull from most of the time. And I think blue also combos well with other colors. So like Assassin's a pretty good deck. Sorcerer's a pretty good deck. Battle Mage can be good in the right instances. And what am I missing? Mage. I think Mage is very fun and good to play. So Laneth can help you get anything that you need from your deck, and that can be super, super helpful. Lame Corpus, 6-cost 5/6. It's giving Cave Bear energy, right? It's actually 1 cost higher than Cave Bear, but alas, it has the same stat line. So I don't know if Lame Corpus gets the unplayable status. It's not too bad. In as far as like these normal basic cards go, I actually don't mind Lame Corpus. I think that it's fine. I'd rather play Cave Bear, but if we don't have access to purple, it's whatever. I'm not going to put it in niche though. But it is kind of like why would I run that when I could run something like the Glacial Dragon instead at my 6th drop, or even the Icewing Dragon. Um, there's a lot better things. Night Predator you could run. So in its own colors, I think that there's better stuff that you could play than the Lame Corpus. It just unfortunately isn't very interesting. But it's not bad in arena, honestly. I mean, if you get this thing in arena, like it's got a decent stat line for the cost. So yeah, all in all, it's fine. Lesser Ward is also a solid card. I don't have a problem with this. It's a 0-cost action that's just going to give your creature a ward, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very basic card, but basic doesn't mean bad. It's giving one of the best keywords in the game to a creature for 0 cost, and it's a way better exchange than what you're getting for the Elixir of Deflection, for example. So don't mind Lesser Ward at all. I think that it's a decent card. Okay, Lightning Bolt's going to be another S tier for us. It's very simple. I can just talk about it on our way up. Deals 4 damage. It's a prophecy, and it is a 4-cost action. This 4 damage is very versatile. You can use it on yourself, you can use it on a creature, you can use it on your enemy. Those are pretty much the 3 options. In all of those instances, it's very good. Drawing this thing on Prophecy is super cool too, especially when it's like down to the wire with you and your opponent, and they hit you, you draw a lightning bolt, and you kill them with that Prophecy lightning bolt. nothing feels better to do, but also nothing feels worse to be on the receiving end of, honestly. So yeah, Lightning Bolt, I think it's a very basic card, but it's super, super good. And it doesn't really need that much explaining to see why it is S tier. Okay, the Lilandril Hexmage is up next. It's a 5/4 for 5. After you play an action, you deal 1 damage to your opponent. I think I'm going to put this into niche just because, um, yes, that value that you can get from it is nice, but probably in general, if you're like looking for a 5-drop card, um, we might be able to find some better stuff up here already, although perhaps not. Um, there are some 5-drop cards, though, that I can think of that aren't in blue that might be a better option. Um, but so far I can't see any, so maybe I'm way off base. Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess that the Lilandril Hexmage, it's solid. If the rest of these are solid, it's solid, right? So yeah, after you play an action, deal 1 damage to your opponent. Even if you don't ever play an action and you just get this thing out as a 5/4 for 5, not a terrible stat line. Anything with an added effect is going to be pretty good. Okay, the Lion Guard Armaments, 5-cost item with Mobilize +3/+4 is the stat line that it gifts you. If this thing is put onto a recruit, it will give it an instant 4/5 stat line for 5. Not bad. Um, just kind of eh, just kind of why. It kind of falls for me under the same blanket as the Covenant Mail, where it's not really giving that much attack power. I think if you're doing an item deck, you're wanting attack power. And the Lion Guard armament just doesn't really justify the 5 cost with the +3 for the item. So I'd rather play something like a Sentinel Battle Mace, for example, in my item-based deck than a Lion Guard armament. But that's just personal preference, I suppose. Lezra Groshar is a 2-cost 2/3. When you summon a creature with 6 cost or more, both Lezra and that creature gain +1/+1. Now with Lezra, her requirements are kind of convoluted. You have to be playing a deck that has some high cost creatures in it, right? But I don't really mind that because she's only a 2-cost creature with a 2/3 stat line, so she's already outperforming her defense anyway compared to her cost. And it's just kind of this easy filler card that you can throw into many of your decks. If you're just looking for an extra unique, like you need 1 card, just throw a Lezra in there. It could be fine. Um, because she typically just kind of sits there and dies in the early game. The buff is really cool that both Lezra and the creature gain the +1/+1. I've had some fun with cards like Cicero before. I've had some fun with a lot of these kind of high end blue cards with her before, and I've got my singleton sorcerer that uses Lezra, so it's fun. She's a fun time. Mace of Encumbrance. This is a 3-cost item with a +2/+1. The summon effect is that you shackle an enemy creature, if you can believe it or not. I think this thing goes pretty easily in Great. It's one of the best items in the game. And consistently, we actually have had quite a few items in the Great tier. So yeah, Dragon Priest Mask, Heirloom, Greatsword, and Mace of Encumbrance. The fact that it gives you a +2/+1 is just very good in and of itself, and the Shackle effect as well is super duper nice. Again, anything that shackles, kind of halts aggression, is going to be very nice to have. The only downside with items is that they, of course, require a creature to be on the board first, unless it's mobilized. Mage's Guild Conjurer. Okay, this is a 6-cost creature with a 2/3 stat line, and it has expertise. Summon a Flame Atronach, then upgrade the Atronach. Um, then upgrade the Atronach Mage's Guild Conjurer summon. So what that means is that the next one will be a Frost Atronach, the next one will be a Storm Atronach, and I forget if this thing can summon Lava Atronachs. I think that this thing is a bit more niche than some of the other cards. While expertise is not that hard to hit, because you could just play this thing and then like rapid shot and boom, you've got a Flame Atronach, it is requiring a little bit more than like the Conjuration Scholar, right? So Mage's Guild Conjurer falls a little bit short in that regard. This is something where I feel like you're really going to want to be playing a specific kind of Atronach deck, and it's not bad in that list. It's just that's kind of the way that I read this one. It has a little bit more attack power and a little bit more defense than the Conjuration Scholar, but that's not really doing a whole lot to go in its favor because you're playing this for the Flame Atronach. You're not playing it for the stat line of the Mage's Guild Conjurer. It's the same thing with the High Rock Summoner. It's good because it summons something that's good. Okay, the Mage's Guild Recruit is up next. This is a 2-cost 1/2 with the summon effect of reduce the cost of an action in your hand by 2. I like this card. I think it's solid. It just reduces the cost of an action by 2. You can use multiple of these to get your Siege of Stros M'Kai a little bit, well, I guess not Siege in multiple, but you could get your Siege down to a 10. Or you could get like Journey to Sovngarde down to a 5 with multiple of these. You could get, if you really didn't have any Pilfer cards or anything, you could get the Ultimate Heist down to a reasonable number with just the Mage's Guild recruits if you were doing some weird assassin type thing. But yeah, it just provides this utility that not really much else does in the game, and I think that it's another fun recruit in the game. Okay, Mage's Guild Retreat. This is a 7-cost support. At the end of each turn, if you played 2 actions, summon a random Atronach. Yeah, I mean, this thing's not really super consistent. However, I will throw it into niche. Also, while I'm thinking about it, I just made that Spider Layer video. I've got to put Spider Layer into niche as well. I found the spot for it. It was submitted by a viewer, and it was a lot of fun. So, Spider Layer, you will get your spot into niche. I would still say the cost for this thing is pretty ridiculous, but it is what it is. It provides good value. Okay, anyway, we're not talking about that though. We are talking about the Mage's Guild Retreat, which I think falls in a similar vein as the Spider Layer, which is why that reminded me of that. So, at the end of each turn, if you played 2 actions, summon a random Atronach. This is again something you're either going to want to be playing a entirely action-based deck to get some value out of this, or you're going to be wanting to play an action-based Atronach deck to get maximum value out of this, which again, it combos well with the Mage's Guild Conjurer, so it's not like that archetype has nothing going for it. However, it's not the strongest thing that you can play, and I find that while I do like Mage's Guild Retreat, it does get removed sometimes, and then that can just ruin your whole game plan sometimes with this thing. So, all in all, it's fine. It just belongs in niche, in my opinion. Okay, Manic Jack, which is paired with the Manic Mutation, is a good card. He's a 3/3 for 3, and when he gains a keyword, he gains +1/+1. I'm throwing him in solid. I think he's pretty good. The Manic Mutation, give a random creature, or give a friendly creature a random keyword, I think is also good. I think these two pair very well together. All in all, they're one of the more equal cards, I think, in the dual sets. So, Manic Jack, of course, when you give him the Manic Mutation, he will gain +1/+1. The total of these is 4, so you will have a 4/4 with a keyword after you've done all of this, combined both of them together, which is good. Also, you can easily get other keywords onto Jack with cards like the Lesser Ward here or Wardcrafter are great examples. You could even use the Baron of Tyr to give him guard, or any kind of item that grants guard could also be used there. So yeah, I think that Manic Jack and Manic Mutation are very, very decently balanced. Master of Arms, 6-cost 4/4. The summon is that Master of Arms equips the 2 highest cost items from your discard pile. This can be good, but I'm going to put him in niche because it requires, for one, items to be in your discard pile, and 2, for you to be playing items at all. Master of Arms might not always come down when you want him to as well. You might get him on turn 6 and you don't have your high cost items in your discard pile yet. You might just have like 2 steel daggers in your discard pile, and that would not be an optimal time to play the Master of Arms. So he would kind of wind up as, like I said with Traven and a few other cards tonight, he might wind up being a bit of a paperweight in your inventory. So you just need to get him at the right time in the match, I suppose, and then you can get a ton of value from this card. Not a bad card by any means, just a little bit conditional. Master Swordsmith, 3 cost, 2/3. At the start of your turn, you give every item in your deck +1/+1. I think as far as item-specific creatures go, this is one of the best ones that you can get. I will still put them in niche because not every deck is going to get a whole lot of value from this. But I will say, if you are running items in a deck, and like a decent number of them, but you're not a specific item deck, you could just throw in one Master Swordsmith and treat him almost like a unique, and I think you'd get a decent bit of value from that. Because this is a type of card that's it's very scary to have out, just like the Ice Wraith. It's very scary to have this out for more than one turn. And your opponent is likely going to recognize that and maybe just use some removal to get rid of this, which at that point, in a deck like the one that I've described, this thing's kind of done its job because it's eaten some removal and it wasn't super necessary in the first place. But let's get out of Fantasyland for a second. Master Swordsmith is good in item decks. He's very good. And you're probably going to want to run like 2 to 3 of them in most kind of decks that you play. Okay, Memory Wraith is up next. Memory Wraith is a 5/5 for 5 with the summon effect of banish your opponent's discard pile. I think that this thing's great. It has come up highly in value for me. I typically run one of these in my intelligence lists just because of like what I was saying before with the Khajiit that discards a card while drawing a card. Discard pile shenanigans have gotten way out of hand in the past few years of Legends, especially with like Midnight Burial, Solitaire, Reanimate. So being able to banish stuff that your opponent has specifically put into their discard pile is really good. It's also got this 5/5 for 5 stat line, which is very beefy, and it equals its cost, which I am a fan of. And I also really like the art on it. I don't know what's going on with this card or this guy. It doesn't really even look like it's from Elder Scrolls, but I think it's cool. Okay. Mentor's Ring is up next. This is a 5 cost item, +3/+3. And the summon effect is that you give the creature, or you give the creature's keywords to each other friendly creature. So like if you played this on Dagoth, you would give all of his keywords to every other creature you had out, which is nuts. Mentor's Ring's easy S tier. I think it's going to be our only S tier item from this list anyway. We might find some more later as we do the other tiers. But yeah, this thing's insane. There's this combo that you used to be able to do with the Nixox and Giant Bat where you equipped this onto like a Giant Bat and you gave everything charge and drain. I'm not really explaining it very well, but that was the combo. It was nuts. They nerfed it a little bit, but it's still kind of possible, just a little bit harder. You just have to set up for it a little bit more. But yeah, Mentor's Ring is great. It can give every creature that you have charge. It can give every creature drain. It can give every creature lethal. It could do many, many things. So the more creatures you have on the board, the better this becomes. And yeah, you're just going to want a card that has a decent keyword at least. So the Midnight Trespasser is up next. This is a 1-cost creature with a 2/2 stat line, and the summon effect is that you consume a creature to gain +1/+1. If you're looking to play this in the first few turns of the game, this is my main problem with this card. I'm going to put it in Y. My main issue with this card is that you're going to want to have a creature killed in the first few turns of a match, and sometimes that's not always necessary, so you might as well just play something else for your early slot. Wardcrafter could be a great option here. Maybe not Harpy, but you'll want to have that in your deck at the very least, you know? So, I don't know. I feel like there's better options for the early game, but you definitely can get this thing up to a good stat line. Like if you laid down a Bandari Opportunist, your opponent immediately killed it, and then on turn 2 you played this to gain that +1/+1. I think that'd be viable, but most of the time this thing's going to come down as a 1-cost 2/2 if you play it early in the match. It can't be played on turn 1 to its fullest power is basically the problem that I have. So anyway, that's my little Midnight Trespasser rant. Mighty Conjuring is up next, which is a 7-cost action, and it has summon a random Atronach. If you have a creature with 5 power or more, you summon a Lava Atronach instead. Mighty Conjuring for me is going to go up into S tier. I think that it fits pretty easily with Conjuration Tutor here because these two comboed together will give you double Lava Atronachs most of the time. It's not too hard to get a 5-power creature, especially with the one we just looked at. Memory Wraith is a good example. Gnarl Rootbender you could have, Hatchery Meddler. Any of these 5-power creatures are going to be really nice to have on the board anyway. So basically being benefited for having a 5-power creature is really nice. And you could play down like a Memory Wraith and a Mighty Conjuring on the same turn on turn 12, and you could immediately get a Lava Atronach, which is just crazy. So, and if you have a Conjuration Tutor down, you double that. So Mighty Conjuring is very, very good. It's a card that I have mixed feelings on because I don't really like Lava Atronachs. I think that on their own they're fine, but like Conjuration Tutor really ruined Atronachs for me. I just really don't like that card. Um, Anything's going to be unbalanced, I think, when multiple of them can be copied per turn, like high power creatures. Wisp Mother is a different story. Yeah, Mistveil Enchanter is up next, 4 cost 2/2 with Ward. The summon effect is +2/+0 if you have another creature with Ward. This is niche just because it's got that 4/2/2 stat line that I've been ranting about a lot. So if you don't have another creature with Ward, I would never play this thing. But if you do have another creature with Ward, a 4/2 for 4 with Ward is not bad at all. Moment of Clarity is up next. This is a 2-cost action that will reveal 3 random cards, and then you choose one to draw yourself. So it's an RNG based card. It gives you some options to draw from. I think it's pretty solid. If you're looking to kind of spice up the way that you play and get some random cards, it can be nice. It can also be a little bit like annoying if your opponent plays this and they get some really busted cards from out of their colors. And it also works really well in Unite type decks. So good card all around. Mystic Dragon, 4 cost 4/4 with Prophecy. Don't really have a problem with it. It's very basic, but it's okay. It has a stat line that matches the cost, and it has Prophecy, giving it a little bit of extra value when compared to some of these more basic creatures like Swamp Leviathan or, any of the stuff that we talked about earlier. Mythic Dawn Acolyte. This is a 5 cost 5/4. At the end of each turn, if you invaded, you deal 2 damage. I think this card is niche just because it falls into invade, and even as invade cards go, it's not very good. Like, I think I would have swapped this thing for being a Daedra that gets the buffs from invading. And then at the end of each turn, if you invaded, you deal 2 damage. As a Daedra that has like drain from having been buffed up by the portal, I think that would be much more interesting than just this random Breton or whatever they are. Because as it stands now, the deal 2 damage is good because it could be face damage as well. But I don't know, it just doesn't stand out to me as much as the other ones. But it definitely is niche. It's fine. It just doesn't, like I said, doesn't stand out. Mythic Dawn Informer. This is a 2/1 for 2 with the last gasp effect of put a random Daedra into your hand. Daedra have gotten very powerful recently, but also there's a lot of them that just flat out invade. I don't think Mythic Dawn Informer is specific to niche invade decks because, like I said, Daedra have gotten powerful. That's a fact. But also, this card can be used to generate stuff for Unite decks because there are Daedra in every single color. So if you're looking to get a specific kind of Daedra, you're more likely to draw blue, red, or yellow than any other color. But there are some in green and purple as well that you can draw from. So Mythic Dawn Informer is a fun card. Okay, Nakreen Dragon Priest, 5/5 for 9. The summon effect is that you draw a card and reduce its cost to 0. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this card. I think it's pretty great. Doesn't quite fall into S tier because it's it's a 9 cost 5/5. But any card that you draw, reducing it to 0 is really good. It's not like Lich's Ascension where everything is reduced to 0, but you can only play 1. With this, you are going to be able to play it no matter what on the same turn. Where did I put that? You are going to be able to play it on the same turn no matter what. But it is true that you're less likely to be able to play something after you've played this. If you play this on turn 9, you get a 0-cost card. You'll get 2 cards down, but eh, it's not really like feasible to play all that much more than Nakreen and your 0-cost card on the same turn. Still a good card though. Okay, Nereid Sister. This is a 4/5 for 5 with the summon effect of give a random keyword, or gain a random keyword. When Nereid Sister gains a keyword, give all friendly Nereid Sisters in play, hand, and deck that keyword. It's a cool card. I don't have a problem with it at all. I don't think that it's niche, but I think that if you're running 3 of these, then you'll be getting the maximum value out of it, regardless of what you do. I have not seen Dr. Monopoly's Nereid video, unfortunately. I just don't have that much time to watch YouTube videos and stuff these days. But I did see that he made a video with these cards, and I'm very intrigued to see how that went for him, because I've always wanted to play this card. I played it a bit when I was younger in this game, but haven't really done a deep dive on it before. So interesting card, good in pairs of 3. Don't ever run this as a 1-of, though. Okay, Niben Bay Cutthroat. This is a 1-cost 1/1, which gains +2 while there are no enemy creatures in this lane. I'm going to throw this in Y. There's better ways to get a +2 for your for your card. Playing any kind of item is generally going to be better than hoping that your opponent doesn't have a creature to play, because anytime that a creature is played in a lane with this thing, it's going to get debuffed by 2. I suppose there is something interesting you could do with like, what's that orc? The orc that buffs itself every time that a creature gains damage. That could be useful for this. Any other case I can't really think of right now for why this would be super beneficial to run. So I'm going to throw it into Y. Okay, Occult Rightmaster. I'm also putting this into Y. 4-cost 4/3 with the summon of put a steel dagger into your hand. When Occult Rightmaster equips an item, you invade. I don't think that Occult Rightmaster, and I've talked about this before, I don't think this card is very good, because it's forcing you to put items into your invade deck, when in reality, you should just be invading. And if you're like making space to put Occult Rightmasters in your invade list just to get like 1 invade proc off, I don't think you're doing it right. Just fill it with more invade stuff, or more Daedra, or more utility cards like Dark Rebirth to get more invades off, or like Ulfric's Covenant, or that's the name of my deck. Ulfric's Uprising could be a great card to have an invade, even because you just proc all these other invades off, you know? I just think that wasting space in your deck to play an Occult Rightmaster and then equip a Steel Dagger onto it, it just wastes time. You're probably still going to win the match because you're playing invade, and it's just like the RNG is in your favor. But, you know, I wish that invade players would do better. When I see their decks and I see Occult Rightmaster, I'm just like, oh, god damn it, dude. Like, use your brain. Build something better. Don't just type invade in the search bar and then throw everything in there. I don't know. It pisses me off when I see this thing, because it's just like, it's not unplayable. Again, it's going to invade. It's a 5/3 body for 4, basically. Or a 5/3 for 5 with the Steel Dagger. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm not impressed with it. Okay, Palace Conspirator is up next. This is a 2/2 for 2. It has the summon effect of draw a card, then discard a card. It's decent. Moving on. Piercing Twilight, 4/4 for 4 with guard. Summon, choose a card in your opponent's discard pile. You banish all cards from your opponent's discard pile and deck with the same name as the chosen card. This is a very easy S tier. This just completely wipes out some people's decks. I've seen people rage quit from having Piercing Twilight played on them, which is very funny. Using this on Bandari Opportunist or Ayleid Guardians is one of the funniest things in the world, because people will just leave. You could use it pretty effectively on Elusive Schemers as well, and any kind of Alduin loop type stuff with Midnight Burial, Piercing Twilight does actually shut that down very effectively. So it's a super awesome card to kind of control what your opponent is playing, and it also has guard and a decent stat line that matches the cost. So one of the best cards in the whole game. Poetic Armiger is up next. 2 cost, 2/3. The Exalt 1 is that you gain a random keyword. So really, we need to think of this as a 3 cost, 2/3 with a random keyword. And with that, it's not too bad. It's not too great, but it's not too bad. I don't think that I would play this normally in any of my decks unless it was Tribunal Temple. So I think I'm going to put it into niche. But I don't really think that it's like bad in any way, shape, or form. Pointy Wall of Spikes, 2 cost, guard with Prophecy, and it's got a 0/3 stat line. When Pointy Wall of Spikes takes damage from a creature, it deals that much damage back to the creature. I like this thing a lot, and I'm going to let my own personal biases cloud my judgment here for a moment. I might change this later, but I really like the Pointy Wall of Spikes. I think that it can stop a lot of interesting aggression because it doesn't just have a flat amount of damage that it can block. If you're going to hit this thing with Nahag Leave, Nahag Leave's going to die because it's just going to reflect damage back. Wards kind of shut the Pointy Wall of Spikes down, I suppose, is something that I should mention. So I think maybe for that, I'm going to put the Pointy Wall of Spikes back into solid. But I just wanted to rant a little bit about it, about how much I like it, because I don't know, it's just a fun card, and I don't know, I can't really just justify it. I just really like that card. Ravaging Elixir, 1 cost support, 3 uses. The activate is that you deal 1 damage to your opponent. Don't have a problem with this. It's fine. A lot of the blue cards are just fine. You know, there's not like a whole lot of crazy stipulations. A lot of them are just about reach and extra damage and whatnot, and I don't have a problem with that. Most of them are very simple and well balanced. Rayvat the Mage. Guess what? He's fine. It's a 4 cost 2/2 with ward. And the summon effect is that you gain a ward. Like you, as the player, you gain a ward. You cannot be hit anymore. Congratulations, you played Rayvat the Mage. Yeah, that's his whole shtick, is that he gives you a ward, and that'll protect you from anything from the Dunmer Nightblade to the Hulking Scalon. So you get 1 free hit as the player, which is super duper cool. There's only one other card that can do that, and we will talk about them eventually. Okay, I had to take a quick break, guys, because my brain was like melting after about 2.5 hours of just straight recording this stuff. So we're back the next day. This is the Redoran Enforcer that we left off on, and he is a 2/3 for 3. He's going to go into Y, just simply because he's not super interesting. He's a very basic card. This card, being a 2-drop, like a 2/3 for 2, pretty good stat line. We've seen that a handful of times before for similar statted and or for similar costed creatures, right? But really, you're not getting that much out of this guy. You'd be better off doing anything with a keyword or a summon effect, really. So he's just not very interesting. Renegade Magister. This is a 5/5 for 5 with the effect of after a friendly action damages an enemy creature, Renegade Magister deals that much damage to that creature. We just talked about this guy recently in a deck that I was doing. I didn't include him. He was just he was in my opponent's deck, and I thought that it was kind of a cool card. So here's the thing with this. I think it's solid. In its stat line and cost alone. A 5/5 for 5 is very good, as we've talked about. We just talked about that actually recently with the Memory Wraith, 5/5 for 5. I think the Memory Wraith's overall utility is much better than the Renegade Magister, but I think that the Renegade Magister being able to double creature damage is interesting. It would combo very well, it seems to me, with Incano. I think that those two comboed together would be immaculate. However, on its own, it is a bit dependent on you playing actions that are going to be damaging, and a lot of those, like we put in the solid category up here, I believe. Where did I put those? Yeah, Firebolt, Fire Breath, Firestorm, any of those doubling that damage, Forked Bolt could be good. But with Breakthrough, that would become even better. So what this card does is it allows Firebolt to be a lightning bolt, essentially, which I've never really thought of before. So honestly, I think like under normal circumstances, I would put this under niche because it tends to belong in action-based decks. But I think just stat line alone, I'm very much into this card. I think that I like the effect that it provides. I think it's very interesting, and the stat line 5/5 for 5, super cool. So I'm going to leave it in solid. Okay, Revealing the Unseen. This is a 3-cost action where you put 2 random actions into your hand. Nothing wrong with it. It's a solid card. It's very RNG based. You're going to be getting actions, so you can, put this in your mage kind of lists with Speaker Tyrannus and get a lot of value out of that. You could do some good Mage's Retreat stuff with this. Overall, um, it's not the best card that you could be running, I suppose, but if you want to, again, add a little bit of spice into your life while playing Legends, you could do Revealing the Unseen, and you could potentially get some fun stuff like Nest of Vipers, for instance, or the Cliff Racer Onslaught could be fun to play. So you can get stuff from outside your colors, and of course, anything that's going to be RNG like this has the potential to help you win in Invade. So always love to see it. Okay, or not invade, sorry, unite. um, Reverberating Strike, 3-cost action is up next. This just deals 3 damage to a creature and all enemy creatures with the same name. I'm going to put Reverberating Strike into Great. This is a excellent source of removal. If your opponent is playing, if they have like 3 Valenwood Sentries out at once, for instance, you play 1 Reverberating Strike and you are getting tons and tons of value from just the one action. Recruit-based decks die very easily to this. Same thing with Ice Storm, I suppose. But anything that's just generating a lot of tokens is going to really suffer from Reverberating Strike. And there's a lot of creatures with only 3 health that you can take this out with anyway. It's 3 damage for the 3 cost that you're playing, alongside with that extra added value of doubling or potentially tripling, quadrupling the damage depending on what kind of deck your opponent is playing. Okay, up next is the Rift and Pickpocket. This is a 4-cost 2/2 with the summon effect of reveal 3 random cards in your opponent's deck, choose one, and draw a copy of it. Rift and Pickpocket is pretty good. I would put it up in a great, actually. It does have this nasty, disgusting 4-cost 2/2 that I really hate to play, but it's also got a very good effect. So you're going to be drawing an extra card from this, and this is going to be a card that's in your opponent's deck. Provided that you are playing against somebody who's made a good deck, you should have decent options to pick from here. You could also get some potentially amazing cards from outside of your colors or unite pieces. So Rift and Pickpocket is just a very versatile option. Also, the 4-cost 2/2, it's not too bad. You can get this thing down pretty reliably on turn 4 and not be too hurt by it, but it really depends on what kind of deck you're trying to play. So I think that the summon effect really justifies it in this case, though, because the body is very weak. All right, Royal Sage is up next. This is a 4-cost 4/4 with the summon effect of if you have more health than your opponent, give each friendly give each friendly creature a random keyword. Royal Sage for me is a very solid option. 4/4 for 4, really good stat line. Unlike the Mystic Dragon that just has Prophecy here, Royal Sage will give you a conditional benefit. So the only problem here is that you need to have more health than your opponent. However, playing a 4/4 for 4, even without that effect, is not too bad. Typically, you're always going to want to try to have some health on your opponent. So I suppose you could say that this belongs in very specific kind of health gain or defense related decks, I suppose. But I think just all around, you're typically going to get at least one proc off with these guys. And if you haven't procced this card or haven't been able to for the whole match, you're likely going to lose it. So yeah, I think that it's a pretty decent choice. Scroll Seeker's up next. This is a 1-cost 1/2 with Ward and Treasure Hunt, 2 actions, which means you have to find 2 actions, and the Scroll Seeker will get +1. Scroll Seeker is something that I don't quite fully understand. I feel like it has the potential to be good. I mean, it has Ward on it, right? It's a 1/2 right off the gate on turn 1, which is very nice. But the treasure hunt is a little bit weird. 2 actions is not that hard to do, especially if you have something like Ice Spike or if you have Revealing the Unseen. That's just an instant proc, but then you'd have to wait until turn 3 at least to get that proc off. So I don't know how often you're going to be actually procking this on turn 1. However, the Scroll Seeker is not a terrible option if you have some kind of a some kind of an action-based deck. I don't really see. I might put it in why. I don't really see a reason to run this when you have stuff like Wardcrafter already that just costs one more, and then you don't have to try to put more actions into your deck to get that 2 attack power. Now, of course, Wardcrafter is suffering from only having 1 defense, but the Wardcrafter just has infinitely more utility than the Scroll Seeker does, in my opinion. And plus, half the time you would rather have the ward that Wardcrafter creates because you can put it on anything rather than it being bound to a 2 attack power, potentially 1 attack power body with the Scroll Seeker. So that's my hot take on the Scroll Seeker, I guess. Seething Flesh Golem is up next. This is an 8 cost 3/8. Seething Flesh Golem's effect is that when Seething Flesh Golem attacks, you deal damage equal to its power to all enemy creatures in the lane that it's in. This card does really well in Invade because you're getting a bunch of keywords for that, and the more times that you have something like Breakthrough or Drain, the more creatures that your opponent has, the more times you're going to be proccing those Breakthrough and Drain type things. This thing's really good with Lethal as well, so I might bump it up into great because I think that it has the potential to really just solidify that a lane is yours. It's very similar to, I'd say, a lot of cards that come down at 8, right? We've got the Indral Mastermind, the Seething Flesh Golem, you've got the Dark Seducer right here. A lot of these really have the potential to just change the way that a lane is being played. And so I think that that's no different here with the Flesh Golem. It has a lot of potential based on what your opponent does in response to it. The weak attack power is also very justified by the fact that it can hit everything in a lane. Okay, the Sentinel Reclaimer. This is a 3-cost 2/3 with the summon effect of put a Steel Dagger and Steel Sword into your hand. This card, I would actually say, is also pretty great. Now, the Sentinel Reclaimer is not really a card that I play around with too much, but I think that you're generating quite a bit of value when you put this down. You're generating 2 items that you didn't have to put in your deck originally, and these items can potentially combo with your Arcane Enchanter, which is super, super nice because you're technically drawing them when you put them into your hand. So really cool added synergy there with the Sentinel Reclaimer. Yeah, the stat line is pretty good too. The 2/3 for 3 is a very nice thing to see. And yeah, just that extra added effect of the Steel Dagger and the Steel Sword is super nice. You don't have to have them bound to the Sentinel Reclaimer as well. You could generate those items and then throw them onto something else, and those can potentially help you get a win. So those are, it's a really cool way to have items in your deck without needing to put them in your deck to take up space from creatures, which I really like. Satanine Courier. This is a 2-cost 0/1 with the summon effect of equip a steel sword to a friendly creature. I would put him in solid, whereas the Sentinel Reclaimer generates 2 items. No, I don't know. The Sentinel Reclaimer generates 2 items, but they're in your hand, whereas the Satanine Courier generates 1 item that will immediately get equipped onto something. So they serve a very similar function. I think Satanine it gives you a lot of this extra reach that your opponent might not be expecting you to have. So if you need 5 damage to kill your opponent, you only have a 2 attack power creature, you could just out of nowhere put this steel sword on them and secure the win. And I think that is super cool. Because also you're paying 2 magicka for that steel sword to be equipped and the extra body on the board, which is a pretty decent amount of value you're gaining, that you're gaining right there. So I like the Satanine Courier. I put him in a lot of my item decks, even though he's not bound to item decks, because the Steel Sword is just nice to have on any kind of aggressive blue type deck. So it's a card to keep in mind. The Shulk Fabricant is a 2/4 for 3 with Guard and the summon of if you have a neutral card in play, you put a random action into your hand. I'm throwing him in Y. I think that I threw his Endurance brother into Y as well. I also threw the Hulking Fabricant in here because it was, if you have a neutral card in play, +3/+3. I just think there's better ways to play neutral. Like, you really just want to get your workshops down with neutral these days, or your Halls of the Dwemer, and then just beat your opponent down. Not really too complicated of a deck to play, and I think that you're cluttering it when you throw in stuff like the Shulk Fabricant or the Hulking Fabricant. So that's really all that I have to say about that card. The action that you generate could be cool, but like you might as well just play Revealing the Unseen, get 2 actions for 3 cost instead of this 2/4 guard that might summon an action depending on your board state. Shimmerine Peddler is a 2/2 for 2 that we're going to talk about next, and at the end of each turn, if you played 2 actions, you draw a card with Shimmerine Peddler. I think Shimmerine Peddler is fine. Um, it might be solid, it might be niche. I think that this is not a card that you're going to put in anything other than Mage, perhaps Sorcerer, but um, I couldn't really see it outside of those 2 kind of deck colors because those are the ones that are really going to be benefiting from playing a lot of actions. So it is a card that matches the stat line very well with the 2/2 for 2 and the added effect. So it's not like it's hindered from being played in other types of decks. You're just going to want to make sure that you have enough actions in your deck to consistently proc this. I suppose it could work. It could work in Assassin. I mean, you can make this work anywhere, right? I just think it's going to shine best in Mage, and that's typically where I see it played, which is probably the home that it belongs in. So I think that it's niche for that reason. Shocking Wamasu is an 8 cost 4/4 with the summon effect of deal 4 damage to a creature. Now, the thing with this card, I've never really been a big fan of this card. I'm actually going to put it into why. There are several other better 8 cost creatures, I feel, than this guy. We just talked about a lot of the 8 costs, like Indoril Mastermind. Dark Seducer is a good option. You know, anything else. Shrine Guardian could be a good 8 drop when we eventually talk about him in Willpower, but yeah, Shocking Wamasu just doesn't really do it for me. The 4 damage dealt to a creature is really the killer here. If it was that you had 4 damage that you could deal flat to anything, like you just generate a lightning bolt, that would be a different story. But just 2 or just 4 creature damage doesn't really justify the 4/4 body that you're paying for 8, at least personally in my opinion. At that point, you might as well play Swamp Leviathan because you're getting a more intense body out on the board. Now, the Shocking Wamasu does at least have some instant value that it provides, and I'm not saying that this couldn't get you a win in a lot of cases, but I think that there's, again, just better ways to go about dealing that damage to creatures. Yeah, specifically Lightning Bolt is the option that pops out, but there's stuff like Reverberating Strike, Ice Storm. There's plenty of types of ways to do poke damage in blue. So this just has never really done it for me. I think that it's good in like Arena. If you get this thing, it could be fine, but I'm not super impressed by it. Okay, a card that I am impressed by though is the Shrieking Harpy. This is a 2 cost 2/1 with Prophecy, summon, shackle a creature. Or with Prophecy, then summon, shackle a creature. This is a great card. It fits very well in that 2-drop slot. It ups your Prophecy count by quite a bit, having 3 of these in your deck, and Shackle is a very powerful effect that can halt aggro efficiently. So in most blue decks that I run, like all of these things in S tier typically go in one of my lists. I'll have Abner, I'll have Twilight, I'll have Ancano, I'll have Harpy. Not so much Mentor's Ring or Mighty Conjuring, but Lightning Bolt, Laneth, like Devaith, Daggerfall Mages, Fingers of the Mountain maybe, like 1 or 2 copies, but all these cards work so well together. Shrieking Harpy has saved my ass several times in this game, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon, so I highly recommend thinking about putting some of those in your deck because it's just a very consistent good card. Oh boy. Okay, up next is the Sigil Keeper. So the Sigil Keeper is a 4 cost 3/4 with the summon effect of Invade, then give your Oblivion Gate a ward. Sigil Keeper is going to the top of niche. It's up here with Chieftain's Banner and Brotherhood Sanctuary for me. This thing's amazing. It really makes it makes it a pain in the ass to get rid of Oblivion portals half the time because it gives it this ward which will just instantly block a hit and give you more time to invade your Oblivion portal, alongside also invading your Oblivion portal, gaining that portal 2 health and buffing up your other Daedra that are summoned after it's been invaded on. So it just really sucks when your opponent plays this down, and for some reason, it's always in my opponent's hand in like the first 5 turns of a match. So Sigil Keeper can Suck my balls. I really hate that card. Sixth House Amulet is up next. This is a 1-cost item that gives a +1/+1 stat line. The summon effect is that if the wielder has 5 or more power, you gain a ward. This will go pretty solidly into solid. It's a good item. The cost is really cool, especially for the added benefit that you can potentially get for this. So it's not too much to ask for a card to be at 5 power, especially after having an item equipped. If we look here just in our solid tier, there's a lot of cards that just have 4 attack power. All that you really need is to equip an amulet to one of these, and then you now have a boosted up creature with a 5/5 stat line with a ward, which can be very, very obnoxious to play against. The fact that it gives a keyword too could be something really nice for like Manic Jack. If you put Manic Jack down, then Manic Mutation, he gets a +1/+1. If he doesn't get ward, then you can put the Sixth House Amulet on him. He'll gain ward automatically from being a 5/5, and then he'll gain a +1 stat line on top of that. So that's just one example that was sticking out to me because they're right here next to each other on the tier list. But it's good on a lot of creatures. It's very applicable in many places. Skeletal Mage is a 7-cost 3/5 with the summon effect of consume a creature, then you deal damage equal to its power to a creature. This, up against Shocking Wamasu, I think that this is better, actually, and I don't really like Skeletal Mage that much either, but the stat line on Skeletal Mage I would take over the Shocking Wamasu or Wamasu, I forget how to pronounce it, but over the Shocking Wamasu, I would take the 3/5, because you have the potential to deal damage equal to the power of one of your fallen creatures, and so long as you're playing like a decent deck, um, I think that you could get some good value with this. If you're playing something even with cards that I would say are suboptimal, down here in Y, like the Mournhold Pilgrim, that just naturally has 4 attack power. It's not very hard to get that much damage that Wamasu provides. So if you're looking to just do a bunch of creature damage for some reason, Skeletal Mage can be that option for you. Now, I really don't like the 7-cost 3/5 stat line here. I wish that it was like a tick higher on something. Maybe like a 7-cost 3/6 or a 7-cost 4/5 would be too powerful here. So I understand that this is a difficult thing to balance because you could potentially have Alduin in your discard pile, right? And if you have like Mundus Stone and Skeletal Mage rolls Breakthrough, and then you deal a shit ton of damage with your consumed Alduin, like it's a tough thing to balance, right? But it's a cool effect, and I think that it's overall a pretty decent card, although it's not one that I would normally run. Okay, Skilled Blacksmith, 2-cost 2/3. This guy's another kind of top of niche card. His stat line is good, 2/3 for 2, and he has this added effect of your items cost 1 less. However, he lives to reduce items in item Battle Mage, essentially, or whatever other deck you want to try to run items in that uses blue. But Skilled Battle Mage is a fantastic creature, kind of a staple of item decks, and I think that he's very, very powerful in those decks. He's not really going to see much play outside of those ever. Sotha Sil, a 9-cost 4/4 with the Exalt 3 of gaining +4/+4, and then the effect of at the end of your turn, if you have an exalted creature in play, you summon an Awakened Imperfect. I think Sotha Sil is not going to go so high as to be an S tier, but he will go up into great. So you're looking to play him as a exalted creature because he can proc off of himself. So if you play him with the Exalt 3 on turn 12, you're getting an 8/8 body because of the +4/+4 you're gaining with this effect of at the end of your turn, if you have an exalted creature in play, you summon let's try it again. You summon an Awakened Imperfect. So the Sil is guaranteed to proc an Awakened Imperfect, which itself is an 8/8 guard, if I'm not mistaken. Sotha Sil will continue generating these. He's a lot like Devaith Fear in that sense. He will continue generating these threats, provided that he stays on the board. So I think that a 12-cost card that generates potentially an 8/8 and an 8/8 right out of the bat, right out the gate, an 8/8 and an 8/8 right out the gate, is actually very powerful. And the more that I talk about it, the more I want to put him up into S tier. He is a very late game card. I will say that much about him. So maybe that will drag him a little bit lower because to be played at 12 Magicka is quite a bit. I don't think that we have a 12 Magicka creature up here. But I do think that his his overall utility and effect is super good, especially because he's got that potential for growth. So if there were some kind of like middle ground here between S and A, I think Sotha Sil would fit in there. I'm going to put him top of A. I think that he's very good, but he doesn't quite break that threshold for me. And if you know what I mean by that, you can kind of comment below and be like, I feel you. Or you can disagree with me. I don't care. Soul Shred is up next. This is a 5-cost action. For each attribute your opponent is playing, you banish the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. The empower of Soul Shred is that it's +1 card per attribute. Soul Shred is very, very, very interesting, but it's also kind of hard to get functioning. I think that just as like a unique action, a unique 5-cost action, I think you could put this thing in a lot of decks and get some value for it on turn 5. Because at minimum, you'll be banishing 2 cards for 5 if you're playing against somebody who's just playing a mono deck. Most people are playing uh, either 2 or 3 attribute decks, though. So against a 3 attribute deck, this is banishing at minimum 6 cards for 5 Magicka, which is super cool. The norm of 4 cards for 5 Magicka is not bad either, especially when you consider that every time that you hit your opponent, you're empowering this action. So I have a whole deck on my channel split into 2 videos because at the time I thought that was a good idea, but it's called Control Shred and it tries to get value from this card. Now that deck is not super good, but I do think that this card is very, very powerful in the right deck under the right circumstances, and that might make it niche in most people's book, but I'm going to kind of bend the rules a little bit here and put it into solid because I think Banish is such a powerful effect. To just remove a card from the game wholesale is crazy. Okay, Soul Split is a 2-cost action. Sacrifice a creature to summon a 3/2 Sundered Shade in each lane. I think this card is good. It fits its cost very well, and you can get some really good value, like with these lower kind of creatures. Like Crucible Blacksmith is a great example. You could put put the Crucible Blacksmith out, generate a card, and then sacrifice it to gain 2 Sundered Shades that are 3/2 in stat line. So you're creating multiple threats, you're getting rid of weak creatures or creatures that will have died anyway potentially, and just getting kind of a hard reset on whatever creature you had out there in the first place, which is cool. Soul Wraith is a 1-cost 0/5 with Prophecy and Guard. I don't really see a reason to run this. I'm going to put it into Y. It fits very specifically into like high Hrothgar type decks, but like at this point, I'd rather play the Embassy Guard than the Soul Wraith because you're at least getting that ward along with the Prophecy and Guard, which is why I value the Embassy Guard a little bit more than I value the Soul Wraith. But that again might just be a opinion. Soul Wraith is a spirit, I suppose, so it does combo well with like skeleton type stuff or Wake the Dead, but I don't really think that you're going to want to pull this on Wake the Dead. You're going to want this played on Prophecy. Okay, Sparksmith is up next. This is a 4-cost 4/4, and this is niche. When a friendly creature equips an item, you deal 1 damage to your opponent. Now, the 4/4 for 4, like we talked about, is not bad. We talked about Royal Sage being a conditional 4/4 for 4. And the Renegade Magister, it kind of reminds me of this, where the effect is not always going to be going off. The thing with the Sparksmith is that you're really going to want to be playing this in decks that have items. Otherwise, it's just a flat 4/4 for 4, which isn't bad, but it's not that great. So I really like this in item decks. It gives you that little bit of extra push, and it makes your opponent choose between what is more of a threat, the creature that you are generating items onto, or the Sparksmith that's going to be doing chip damage the whole time, but could potentially lower you down into lethal range or potentially kill you. So Sparksmith is a fun option to include in your item decks. Speaker Tyrannus is a 10-cost 6/6 with the effect of after you play an action, you put a random action into your hand. I'm going to throw Tyrannus up into A tier. He generates consistent material, which acts sort of as draw by making it so that way your hand will never truly run out of stuff so long as you have a action, which is very cool. You can get into some really fun cycles with Tyrannus, and he enables a lot of other cards in the game. Like he can make something like Rootbender really insane if you continue to draw cards that are self-targeted. So I think that just for the potential of value that he's going to add to any game that he's in, he deserves the great spot, the spot in the great tier. A lot of these cards in great, I think could potentially get bumped up into S just because of the sheer utility that they provide. So I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about my placements because it feels like I've valued the other colors in S tier a little bit more than blue, but there's so many good cards in blue, it's hard to tell. Okay. Up next is the Spear of Embers. This is a 5-cost item with Prophecy +3/+3. And the text on the card says, instead of equipping Spear of Embers, you may throw it at an enemy creature to deal 3 damage. So if you do that, you're basically spending a Prophecy to deal a reverberating strike worth of damage, or you're spending 5 magicka to deal a reverberating strike of damage. I think this thing is kind of at a Y for me. I tried using this for a while because it sounds so cool and so fun at first, right? Like, ooh, I can turn my item into a throwing action basically to deal reach, but it's only creature damage and it's whatever. Like the +3/+3 is cool. There's items that can do that a little bit better, I think, than the Spear of Embers. At that point, you're better off playing Lion Guard armaments. But if you really want that extra chance for a prophecy, it's not the end of the world. Like I wouldn't be offended if you played this. I just think like, why would you play it when there's other stuff that you could remove creatures with, like Reverberating Strike, Ice Storm, or Lightning Bolt, and those are all in blue. So yeah, not really my cup of tea. Okay, up next is the Spirit Knife. Spirit Knife is a 7-cost action that deals 7 damage and it draws a card. I'm also putting this into Great. And that might not be the most accurate place for it. I'm still kind of mulling it over, but it deals a whole 7 damage and it draws a card. 7 damage is such a unique, interesting amount of damage for something to do because I can't think of anything else that does that. Potentially, the guy that we just talked about, the Skeletal Mage, could do that if one of your creatures with 7 attack power were to die. However, you're not really going to see that elsewhere in the game. So it deals a very cool amount of damage. Along with that, potential for drawing a card is super nice with it, and it just kind of keeps things going at a very consistent rate. Staff of Ice is up next. This has Prophecy and Mobilize. It's a +1/+1 item, and the summon effect is that the wielder deals 2 damage. I think this thing's pretty decent. It can go down in an empty lane with nothing on it. It's basically just a free 2 damage that you can do to anything. And the potential for like the widespread paths that this card could be applied to is very interesting to me. So you could use it to kill your opponent with lethal because it's a mobilize action. You can think of it sort of as a 1/1 that just gets to do 2 damage, which I can't really think of a whole lot else that can do 2 damage. I mean, we've got the Camlorn hero up here that can deal 2 damage to an opponent. And then we'll get into some cards later on that can deal an instant 2. But just a flat out like dealing 2 damage to your opponent is pretty nice. This thing will be buffing a creature up if you play it onto a creature. It's got that prophecy, so it can be played either on your turn or your opponent's turn. And when you start to think about the cards that this can be put onto, so it can be put onto lethal creatures, it can be put onto drain creatures, it can be put onto Gardener of Swords to duplicate it, and then you deal 4 damage in one turn. It really has a lot of different applications for it. So there's not just one specific way that this card was meant to be used, and I find that very, very interesting for it. Now, it's not the best. It's, of course, going to generate at the minimum a 2/2 creature because it will generate a 1/1 recruit, and then the 1/1 Staff of Ice will be added onto that. So a 2/2 creature for 5 that deals 2 damage. Not the most optimal stat line for something like this, but it can come out in a very interesting way, and um, it can be applied in various different scenarios. So that's why I find that card so interesting. Okay, where did my Staff of Sparks go? There it is. So it's way down here at the bottom because I forgot to add it in. I forgot to add it in previously, and Vincenzo was very nice to point out that I didn't have this in the list. So you guys can all check him out and say thank you for making me not look stupid. But yeah, Staff of Sparks, it's a 6-cost item that gains +3/+0 to whoever wields it, and it's got this super cool effect of when the wielder attacks, it deals 1 damage to all enemy creatures in this lane. Yeah, I think this thing's pretty great. We've gotten a lot of great cards so far, and I think that they've all kind of justified their placement. Staff of Sparks here is super nice because you could put this on, again, like I just said with the other card we were talking about, you could put this on a lethal creature, and then no creatures can enter the lane anymore without dying, basically, unless they're a charge creature and they can kill the creature that's wielding the Staff of Sparks. This thing does not add any defense to the creature holding it, making it just as easy to kill, technically, as it was before the item was on. It just adds more attack power and more potential damage overall. When you really start cooking with this thing, if you have like breakthrough on there, if you have a, oh god, what's the one action, a Crusader's Assault, and this kills 4 creatures, it's going to be crazy. So Staff of Sparks is another card that has a lot of potential. I think that it just has to be applied in the right manner to get the best out of it. But it doesn't just belong in item decks. That's kind of something interesting about this too. Um, Staff of Ice and Staff of Sparks to me are not bound to item decks because the utility that they provide is not simply uh, it's not as surface value as just like put this on a creature, they gain attack power, and you use that to hit your opponent. It's more like put this on a creature and now you control the lane, right? So that's the interesting part of that card to me. Okay, Stealer of Secrets, 6-cost 1/1 with Ward, summon +1/+1 for each action in your discard pile. This is just a very specific card that you'd have to be running a specific deck to get value out of. And in those decks, it is good. I mean, you need to have 5 actions in your discard pile to get this thing to be a 6/6 with Ward, which is not asking too much, but it can be kind of annoying when you're not really drawing those actions and you get a bunch of these in your opening hand. It's happened to me before several times. And this thing is basically the action version uh, of Flesh Atronach, which is +1/+1 for each creature in your discard pile. Stealer is +1/+1 for each action in your discard pile, and they're both decent cards. They just have to be in decks that will benefit them. Okay, straight up Steel Sword, 2-cost item that is a +3/+0. This is decent. The cost that you're paying for the added attack power that you're going to be gaining is not too bad. So I think that overall, as far as items go, this thing's actually balanced pretty well. Obviously, the Satanine Courier is my preferred choice to just having a steel sword in your inventory, because at least with the Satanine Courier, you've got a body that you can play the steel sword onto as soon as you've got it. Whereas the steel sword is just the +3/+0, which again, it's not bad. I mean, it's the same attack power you're getting from Staff of Sparks, but it doesn't have any utility to it other than being an aggro card, which is fine, like I've said. But I personally, here's what I'll say with this. I will put it into, I don't know if it belongs Y status, but like when cards like the Satanine Courier exist, or the Sentinel Reclaimer exist to generate steel daggers and steel swords for you, I think that the utility, or not utility, the necessity of Steel Sword itself being a basic card, it's not feasible anymore to just put a Steel Sword in your inventory, is my hot take there. I would rather run the other cards, because then you don't have to be wasting space in your 50-card deck, assuming you are running the minimum, or 75. You don't have to waste space on just a flat item, whereas it still needs a creature to be applied for, or applied to. So that is my Steel Sword rant. Strange Brew is up next. This is a 1-cost action that will transform a creature into your hand into a random creature that costs 2 more. Then you reduce its cost by 2. Which is interesting. You're basically morphing a creature and then reducing its cost. So it's like a bizarre version of Barrelzar's Tinkering. I'm kind of here for Strange Brew, but also I think in most cases You know what? I'll put it into niche. I think you've got to be running like Unite to get the most value out of this, or um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's the only place that Strange Brew lives is Unite. But I think that Barrelzar's Tinkering provides much more value because it automatically has Betray on it. And if you're just trying to get random creatures from out of your colors, then that's a better way to do it. If you're also trying to get cards that are super high in cost, this is an interesting way to do it, but I don't think that it's the best way that you can do it. And also, if you're running cards in your deck that you just have in there, so that way you can bump them up with Strange Brew, they're probably not very good cards in the first place. Okay, Studious Greybeard is up next. This is a 1-cost 0/4. At the start of your turn, look at the top card of your deck. You may discard it. I think this is just flat out good. The 0/4 is very hard to kill. It's like a double invaded Oblivion portal right out the gate on turn 1. And it typically will get that first turn off if you are able to play it on turn 1. The ability to drop something in your discard pile, as we've stated before, is very, very powerful. And so I think that this is no exception to that rule. It also allows you to just dig through your deck. So at some moments in a game, you might not want the moment of clarity that's being provided to you. You might want to throw that away. So you can do that and then cycle your deck. I've done this before in my Singleton Sorcerer video that I have on the channel. I have the Studious Greybeard in there, and there are several instances where sometimes you'll draw like a 8-cost creature on turn 2. You don't want that, so you can get rid of it and just take the L and continue on and have a solid early game. That's what this card really provides, is either a solid early game or a good way to chug through your deck in the mid to late game. Okay, the Stadium Headmaster. This guy is a 6/3 for 6 with the summon effect of each player draws 2 cards. I think this card's a little bit slept on actually, now that I'm looking at it. The ability to draw 2 cards is super cool. I feel like in the right deck, the Stadium Headmaster could gain a lot of tempo. What my ideal version of using this card would be is that you have you have like a board state where your opponent has like 8 cards, and then you put this guy down, you draw 2, your opponent draws 2, and then you're able to like play a Dark Rebirth on this guy and generate more cards, and then your opponent's overdrawing stuff while you're still gaining cards. I think that's probably the best way to use this guy. He also combos well with that card I was talking about much earlier in the video, and I don't know where I put them. Um, but it's that one card that draws other cards. I probably put them in Y. Yeah, the Insightful Scholar. So draw a card for each card your opponent drew this turn. I'm guessing Insightful Scholar and the Stadium Headmaster were intended to be used together, and I think that as a combo there, that's not bad, but at that point you might be drawing too many cards, and your opponent, I don't know, your opponent might just get the advantage on you from you having too much shit in your hand, which is something that I have personally fallen into several times. Somerset Orrery is up next. This is a 6-cost support with 3 uses. The uses are that when you activate it, you shuffle all prophecy cards in your hand into your deck, and then you draw that many cards. I think this thing is, oh boy, it's a way to get prophecies back into your deck. So that way you like can get a refresh and potentially draw them when your runes are hit, which I think is cool. I'm the one that's constantly complaining about drawing prophecies. Like, it's much nicer to hit a prophecy on your rune being broken than to actually play them from hand half the time, because you're getting that value there because you don't have to actually pay the cost. So Somerset Orrery I think is a bit niche though, because it fits in decks that have a lot of prophecy cards already. I don't think that it's going to get much value in just your normal standard deck that you're going to put in, but I do see the appeal of this card in some sense. The 6 cost for a support though is a little bit Y-ish to me, because this could probably be a 5 cost, and I don't think people would be too upset about it. It might be a little bit more viable too if it was a 5 cost and be played in actual real decks instead of just in Magical Fantasyland. Okay, Sunken One is up next. So Sunken One is a 7-cost 5/7 with Ward. It's a cool reference to an Oblivion quest, but personally for me, I just don't really like this thing all that much. I think if we look even just at Thorana, where is it? Thorana's Lawman does kind of a similar function. It's got 2 less health, but it's got that 5/5 stat line. The Sunken one is Y-ish, but it is a Daedra also, so it's niche. It fits into invade type themes. If you are able to run charge on this thing with an Oblivion Portal, giving it a keyword on like your Oblivion Portal's 4th or 5th upgrade, that's going to be wild value for you because this thing's going to get reduced in cost. It's going to get its attack power and defense upgraded by 1, and it is going to gain a keyword other than ward. So it's already stacked with the best keyword in the game, and you'll be gaining something else on that. So whether it be lethal, drain, regenerate, anything that this thing gets is going to be good. So I guess in invade decks it is viable. We have to take that into account when we're talking about Daedra, because invade is is a fun mechanic. Okay, Supreme Atromancer. This is a 10 cost 3/3 with the summon effect of summon a Flame Atronach in each lane. When you summon another creature, deal 2 damage to your opponent. This is going to be an instant S tier. This generates a Lightning Bolt worth of damage while also advancing your board state by 13 damage with the Flame Atronach, and the Supreme Atromancer being 5/5 plus 3 for the attack power. So a flat out 13 damage on the board, and then that added 4/4 bonus to your opponent's face, and then every time you play a creature after that, you gain 2 extra damage on your opponent's face. It is a huge package worth of stuff, and I love it. It's super fun. If you've stacked your deck appropriately with like small cost creatures or cards that summon other creatures or multiple creatures, this thing can get tons of value. So definitely something that once it goes down, your opponent needs to get rid of it, or you are likely to die in the next turn or two. Unfortunately, it is rather weak. It does die to Ice Storm very effectively. It does die to um, Reverberating Strike is a great way to get rid of this. It does die to Lightning Bolt, obviously. So a lot of your standard easy stuff is capable to get rid of this, but I think that that's fair because it's such a powerhouse of a card. The weak stat line is justified by the sheer amount of bullshit you are going to be able to do with it. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Okay, Telekinesis is a 4-cost action. Equip all of your items in play to a friendly creature. So equip all of your items to one specific creature. I love this card. I'm going to put it up here at the top of S tier. Telekinesis, for me, super fun card. It allows you to deal a bunch of damage with your creatures that already have an item, then save one creature for the end, then you use Telekinesis, you get all of those items transferred onto one creature for the one final huge killing blow. As long as you're good at math, Telekinesis is super good, and it has this awesome combo with the Gardener of Swords, which I think is just so fun, where it will duplicate literally every single item that you have in play because of the Gardener being out. So, and especially if you have 2 Gardeners, it just gets so stupid. So, something to really think of in the future whenever you guys are using Telekinesis or using Gardener of Swords is to include those 2 together. Telvanni Arcanist, 3 cost 3/2. The last gasp of this card is that you put a random action into your hand. This is a solid card. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't really get super exceptional. The last gasp is good. Random actions can be, like we've talked about multiple times, used in many different facets in this game. So I like the Arcanist. I think it's a great spot for your 3 drops in many different intelligence decks. Tel'Vos Magister. This is a 6-cost 5/4 with ward. At the end of your turn, if Tel'Vos Magister has a ward, you gain ward. I'm going to put him into great. I think he is pretty great. He's a swell guy. Okay, having looked at this list, guys, because there's so many great cards, I do think I'm going to bump some of these up into S because it doesn't feel right to me having this many in great. Because personally, I do value Doppelganger quite a bit because it can turn into any of these cards. So I think that that's a really good reason to have that there. Did these all belong up here? I don't know. Guys, leave some comments below about some of this stuff. I'm really very curious about how you guys think that this tier list has held up in terms of accuracy, because I really like a lot of these blue cards, but I just don't know quite where to fit them because a lot of them are so good. I do think Doppelganger will stay up here. and I'm going to leave the Tel'Vos Magister just because having a ward on your face is super, super valuable. Whereas we had Tavar down here. Where did I put him? Oh, Rayvot, my bad. We had Rayvot down here. He summons a ward one time, and he's a particularly weak body. The Tel'Vos Magister has a 5/4 body for 6 with ward. And he's got this added effect of if he still has his ward, then you have a ward. So it's a symbiotic relationship. You want to provide him with a ward, he will give you a ward for providing him a ward. It's a super cool thing. And I think that just the ability to have that and to keep all damage off of your face for at least one hit is very, very nice. It creates this instant card that your opponent does have to get rid of, otherwise they will not win the match unless they're playing something like Unite the Houses or some Jarl Balgruuf shenanigans. Temple Conjurer is up next. It's a 2/2 for 2 with the Exalt 3 of summon a 5/3 Flame Atronach with Breakthrough. I don't think this thing's anything crazy, but it's not bound specifically to Tribunal Temple type decks. It will thrive in Tribunal Temple type decks, but it's not bad outside of it. It has this basic 2/2 for 2, so if you need to play it without the Exalt, you're not really getting punished for that, but it does thrive better with the Exalt. Summoning that 5/3 Flame Atronach for 5 Magicka, along with a 2/2 stat line to boot, is a good deal. Thalmor Embassy, your high elves cost 1 less, and you can't be damaged by actions. I feel like as a like unique support, like if this was just if it had the single unique border around it, people might play it more. You get this high elf effect, which like it's not that great. It can be kind of nice because it's nice for high elf tribal, which I don't really see too many people play, but it's a thing. So it's nice for like high elf tribal mage. But also, this you can't be damaged by actions is super cool because it just completely negates the effectiveness of cards like Lightning Bolt or whatever else is going to be damaging your face. I really like it. I think it's an interesting effect to have in the game, and yeah, it's actually very well statted, I think, for a 3-cost support. It just belongs in, uh, High Elf Tribal is really the place that you would play this. But I don't think that as a unique card, it would be too bad. It might fit into Solid just because of that thing with the can't be affected by actions. Okay, Thorana, this is unplayable. I mean, 3/8 stat line for 5 is just so. No, I'm kidding. This thing is is S tier. So yeah, 5 cost 3/8 is ridiculous. After you play an action, you shuffle 3 0-cost copies of that action into your deck. I mean, how do you go wrong with that? Almost any action is going to be a good thing to shuffle back into your deck. This Thorana can shuffle in 3 copies of Siege of Stros M'Kai. She can shuffle in 3 more copies of Lightning Bolt, of Piercing Javelin, Edict of Azura, Fingers of the Mountain, Soul Tear. You will get extra value for playing a card while Thorana is out, which is nuts. An action specifically. Because of her 5 cost as well, she can be played with multiple actions on the turn that she goes down. So you will guarantee that you are actually getting some kind of value with her. If you play this down on turn 12, for example, you put Thorana down first, then you can put a Lightning Bolt down. You still have 3 Magicka to work with. You could Soul Tear something, and then you've got 6 copies of cards in your deck, and you've gained a ton of tempo and momentum on your opponent. This 3/8 stat line is so hard to get rid of. You cannot kill her with just 1 Lightning Bolt. You'd have to use 2. You can't kill her with even 2 Ice Storms. You can't even kill her with Spirit Knife, which is actually a combo in and of itself. If you are running Spirit Knife, you can stab Thorana with a Spirit Knife, and she will shuffle 3 more copies, 0-cost copies of Spirit Knife into your deck because she can survive that blow. She can just really change the way that a game is being played by being out. If you do not eliminate Thorana within the first turn or 2 of her being down, she is going to cause some immense problems. Her stat line is just the stupidest thing. It's really ridiculous. Okay, Thorana's Lawman, 8 cost 5/5 with Guard and Ward. I think this thing's just flat out okay. The Guard and Ward are 2 nice keywords to have. it combos well with some keyword-based decks that are trying to get every keyword in the game on some card. Um, it's not that interesting, but it's better than I think the Shocking Wamasu. Like I said, I'd rather take the 8 cost 5/5 with 2 keywords than this 8 cost 4/4 that just deals 4 creature damage. So that might be a hot take on my end. I'm not sure, but I've played with Thorano's Lawman quite a bit, and I do like it. Okay, Thief of Dreams is up next. A 5 cost 4/4. Summon. You see a vision of 2 of your opponent's cards. You have to guess which one is in their hand, and if you're right, you will draw a copy of it. I think this thing's actually going to go up into great. The reason for that is that you gain a lot of game knowledge with this card. So you have to have some decent knowledge of how the game is going, but you see a vision of 2 of your opponent's cards. That's what it says. It will give you knowledge of 2 cards that your opponent is running. And then if you guess the correct one, that's awesome because now you know what the right one was. And if you have a good memory, you'll be able to remember what the other card was that you saw. So both cards are guaranteed to be in your opponent's deck somewhere, which is awesome. Yeah, if you guess the correct one that's in their hand, you draw a copy of it, which is super cool. And typically your opponents are going to be running good stuff because if you're playing competitive, they are going to be trying to win unless they're me half the time. So yeah, really good stuff with the Thief of Dreams. 5 cost 4/4 that has a very cool action or summon effect. The Throne Aligned. This is a 2 cost item that provides guard and +3/+3. However, it shackles the wielder. I think this thing's just like, eh. I don't know why I would really play this. In a defense-heavy deck, I'd rather just use decent guards to start with. I don't want to shackle my own creatures. If you do have the Dres Renegade, this becomes a much more viable option to be played. If you want to play this on something like a Hulking Scalon, that's really cool too. So there are some synergies that you could have with this, so perhaps it should go into niche because of that. I mean, it does give you a lot of good value. The +3/+3 and a keyword is very cool. It'll block up a lane pretty effectively. Um, downside is that it is a item, so it needs to be equipped to a creature. And if you have a creature out, that's cool. But if you don't, then I think that this thing is going to be why. So I don't know. That's kind of my hot take, I guess. Okay, Tome of Alteration is up next, a 4 cost 2/2 item that's going to draw a card. Here's the deal with Tome of Alteration. I think this card is a lot like the Steel Sword, where it's good. You just don't typically want to be throwing these in your decks as is. You have plenty of cards that can generate them. And by plenty, I'm mostly just talking about the Daggerfall Mage and how many of them it can generate. Because once you get wards stacked on the Daggerfall Mage, you can get like 3 or 4 Tomes of Alteration easily without having to put in much work. So I think that just automatically having them in your deck taking up one of your 50 cards is not something that I'm super keen on. I don't do it myself whenever I play item decks. Maybe that's something that I'm wrong about, but I don't really have a problem winning most of my matches without these in them. So that's just my hot take. If there's a card that can, I need to stop saying hot take. That's my take. Uh, if you have a card that can generate something, there's no real reason to put that something into your deck as a starting card, is my position here. Although, being able to draw a card and gaining +2/+2 is good, so I will put this kind of at the top of niche along with a lot of these other item decks because I think that they're good, but they just don't really qualify for me because that's the big bummer with items is that they need a creature to be played onto. Trader's Flame. This is a 7 cost action with Betray. You deal 2 damage to all enemy creatures in a lane. If you betray one of your own creatures, you will be dealing 4 damage to all enemy creatures in a lane. This thing's interesting because it's kind of a parallel to the Firestorm here. So you're kind of getting a discount here because 2 Firestorms would be 4 damage to all enemy creatures in a lane, which would be 8 Magicka. Trader's Flame is 7 Magicka as opposed to 8, but there are different requirements here. So you have to be doing, you have to be killing one of your creatures to get this to go off, which already it's not that big of an ask, but sometimes it's not possible. because you don't have a creature on the board or you're not willing to kill one. So is it worth it to play a 7-cost action to deal 2 damage to an enemy lane of creatures? Probably not. Is it even worth it to do 4 damage to an entire lane? Maybe not. I think at this 7 spot, you might be better off waiting a turn and just playing the Seething Flesh Golem, because that card is overall, I'd say, a little bit more consistent for holding down a lane rather than just, you know, doing some chip damage like that. Um, I'm not saying that it doesn't have its place. I think with Ancano, this could be a lot of fun actually, but it's not really for me. I think that just paying 7 for all that doesn't really do it for me. So I'm going to throw it into Y. I don't really get this card. I'd rather play Ice Storm and deal 3 damage to everything without betraying it instead of just 4 damage to everything in a lane. 3 damage to everything with Ice Storm is just 3 damage to everything. Trader's Flame is specifically with enemy creatures in one single lane too. So it's a lot more restricted. Transmogrify. Okay, this is a 7-cost action. You sacrifice a creature to summon the top creature from your deck. There's a very interesting combo that can be used with this. I'm going to throw this into niche. There's a very interesting combo that can be used with this. It's a particular brand of Alduin looping, which before we had Call Dragon, it was a little bit harder to pull this off. Before we had Call Dragon, before we had Midnight Burial as well, it was a little bit harder to pull this off. But what you would do with Transmogrify is you would have the Vardvarks. Where did I put those? Probably did I put those in niche? I probably talked about this combo. Yeah, Vardvark Experiment. Okay, so you would play this card, and you'd have only Alduin in your deck. You would play Vardvark Experiment in a deck of 49 actions and 1 Alduin. Play this, get Vardvarks down. You would sacrifice one of the Vardvarks, and then you would automatically summon Alduin. And then you would use, where is it? You would use Dark Rebirth on the Alduin. So that way you have an Alduin on the board, and you have an Alduin in your discard pile. That way, the only card that Alduin will pull from the discard pile is Alduin. So every single turn is a board wipe. You could get Necromancer's Amulets, and every time that your Alduin killed the other Alduin, you would gain 1 health, and it was just this horribly cursed engine. I highly recommend you guys to at least try to play it, to be honest, because it's so stupid. Very hard to pull off, not super viable, because obviously your opponent can just piercing javelin your Alduin or something like that, but there are a lot of ways to get around it and a lot of ways to have fun with it. So I don't know. It was an Alduin loop that, like, it was stupid. If you do play it though, if you do play it and you get it off, the honorable thing to do is concede the match after you've held your opponent hostage for however many turns, because it's just rude, man. But yeah, that's the one combo I know with Transmogrify. Otherwise, you're kind of paying 7. You're paying 7 magicka to just sacrifice a creature and summon something that you don't really know what it is, unless you're playing like something that's going to tell you what the top card of your deck is. So okay, there's potentially some game knowledge that you might need to have to make this card really work, but I think under the right conditions, it can be okay. All right, Tribunal Oathman, 4-cost, 3/3. The summon is that if you have a willpower card in play, you gain 4 health, and if you have a endurance card in play, you gain +1 max magicka. This card actually might not sit with the other Oathmen. It might not be invited to the barbecue. The reason being is it gains you max magicka. So a lot of this other stuff is like, yeah, you might want it to proc on both, but it's not necessary. But Tribunal Oathman, you actually don't really need the willpower effect at all here. I've seen people play this in just sorcerer lists, and they get decent value with it because gaining +1 max magicka is just good. So I think I'm going to actually put this into solid. He's bumped up a grade from the rest of these guys because his endurance. Well, no, okay, he's niche because you still have to play him with endurance, right? He's not good on his own. He requires something else. So, but I do think that he does fly a little bit higher than these other guys because you can play them in just or with just one color rather than the two, and get pretty similar value to what you would get for playing him in Tribunal. Plus his stat line's pretty good. Trusty Sword, 0 cost, +2/+0 item. Trusty Sword for me, man, I typically just, I don't like Trusty Sword. Lame card art to start. Not to like throw shade at anyone who designed this card, but just boring to look at. Like, look at Steel Sword when compared to the Trusty Sword. Look at these two next to each other. So much more interesting to look at the Steel Sword than the Trusty Sword, but maybe that's just me. The 0 cost is nice, but I would rather in this instance have the +3 than the +2, I think. But I might be crazy for that. I don't know. There's just so many other actions or items or supports that can get you this +2 that, yes, while the 0 cost is cool, I just really don't like this taking up space in my deck list. I'd rather play a Redoran Enforcer at this point. So I don't think Trusty Sword is unplayable because it does provide some sort of value, but there's just so many other things that do provide that value that I don't know why you would play it. Valkyna's Mage is up next. 1 cost, 1/1 with Ward. Top of niche because it's a great invade card. When Valkyna's Mage's Ward is broken, you invade. This is basically the same principle as our other ward cards, like, where did I put them? The Breton Conjurer, wherever he landed, and the Daggerfall Mage. So these guys, obviously they get more power the more times that you have ward applied onto them over and over again, and by breaking that ward, you will continue to generate value. So Valkynas is super good, especially when you get it down early in the game, because your opponent might not be expecting this thing to be played on turn 1 against them, whatever they play. It can block lethal and stuff like that too, so overall very cool. Okay, Vanus Scribe, or Vanus's Scribe, is a 4 cost, no, sorry, scratch that, reverse it. 3 cost, 4/3. The expertise effect here is that you reduce the cost of random actions in your hand by 1. I think this is just kind of niche. I wouldn't typically run this in a lot of decks that I play. Cost reduction is good, but it's a random action and it requires something to be played already. I just don't really know why I would put this in anything other than an expertise type deck that has a lot of actions. So I think it's got a very specific thing that it's trying to do, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, Vastari is a 5 cost 1/4 unique legendary with the summon effect of fill this lane with 1/1 skeletons. Vastari then has +1/+0 for each friendly spirit and skeleton. Yeah, she is flat out niche because she really needs to be in Skeleton Sorcerer is where she thrives the most, which is not the easiest deck to pull out a win with, I will say. But it's not impossible to, and I think that her buff is very interesting, that she summons stuff that buffs her, and then you can have more stuff that will buff her and whatnot, so she's cool. The 5 cost for the 1/4 stat line, though, is going to feel really bad if your opponent immediately ice storms the skeletons that she summoned or something, because then you're just left with this 1/1 body that's been completely taken out, so playing it on turn 5 might be a little bit tough. You might want to wait until you've got a better board state in the game with a lot of skeletons and spirits and whatnot to get the maximum value from her. Vigilant Ancestor is up next. This Vigilant Ancestor is a 4/5 for 3 with guard, and the Vigilant Ancestor is permanently shackled. I think this card's fine, actually. If you have Dres Renegade, it becomes much better. But as its own card, I think that it just provides this really annoying, intimidating wall for your opponent to have to break through before they can hit your face. Now, it's not the most active card in the world, but it's very similar to like Pointy Wall of Spikes. It just has a very high threshold of damage that it can dish out, and it has a decent amount of health. So I like it. I can't really justify putting it any lower than solid. Okay, the Vigilant of Stendarr is up next. This is a 3 cost 5/2, and whereas the Glenumbra Sorceress was a 5/1 with Ward, and I said that it was pretty solid, I think that this is significantly weaker. So the Vigilant of Stendar is it's going to come down a bit earlier, but man, this thing dies to a lot. I mean, anything that can die instantly to the Redoran Enforcer, you might have a problem on your hand with that. So it can be countered very quickly and very easily. Although the cost benefit is not like that bad because you're only paying 3 magicka for this, so getting down a 5/2 body potentially could be good, but I'd rather not include it in my lists. I'd rather just play something a little bit more consistent than this, but to each their own, I suppose. Okay, I never know what to do with this card. The Wandering Skeleton is a 2/2 for 2 with the last gasp of Summon a 1/1 Skeleton. He's fine. I think you'd really just want to play him in Skeleton Sorcerer, much like the other skeleton cards that we've talked about. I think you'd play them in Skeleton Sorcerer, and that would be about it. If you're playing him in a Flesh Atrodox Sorcerer list, that could be something too, because you're generating 2 creatures for just 1, getting more stuff in the discard pile. So that's not too bad. But yeah, I'm not really too enthused by this. I think there's better 2 drops in blue for you to play with. Speaking of, we've got the best 2 drop potentially in blue is the Ward Crafter. This is a 2/1 for 2 with the summon effect of give a creature ward. This is an amazing card. I'm going to throw it right up into S tier with the other amazing blue cards. Um, yeah, this thing does a great job of not only providing wards for just normal everyday average creatures, but also providing wards for creatures that need their wards reapplied. So I always say that the Daggerfall Mage and the Ward Crafter are related in somehow. I don't know quite how, but they have to be because they're so similar in cost and they're so similar in stat line and they are so similar in function. They complement each other extremely well. The Daggerfall Mage will go down, deal some damage, get the ward broken on itself, and then Wardcrafter will come right in, almost like their battlefield medic, and just patch them up right away, which is super, super nice to do. It feels great generating tons of Tomes of Alteration, but that's just one specific combo. Wardcrafter is going to provide value for anything that it gives the ward to, whether it be a Fighters Guild recruit or something like Ancano. It can buff big creatures, small creatures, any creature in between, and you will generate some kind of value because ward is very, very good. Okay, what is this? The Wild Clumsiness. God damn. Uh, this card is so weird, I've barely ever used it. Wild Clumsiness is a 3-cost action with Betray, shackle a random enemy creature in each lane. This is our first unplayable. It took us this long to find an unplayable card in blue. Yeah, this card sucks. It's so stupid. Shackling a random creature is not what you want. Uh, Now, it's a random creature in each lane, yes. So if your opponent only has 1 creature in each lane, yes, this will shackle them. But you're paying 3 cost just for a shackle, and the Betray is just weird on it. You could potentially shackle 4 cards at once with this. So maybe with the Drez Tormentor, this could work as some sort of weird shackle combo. In fact, it would work in that deck pretty effectively, I would say. But it's stupid, right? It's just dumb. I don't like this card. I think it's another one of those like stupid but fun cards. But I don't really see a reason to play this in any competitive kind of deck. So for me, it's going to get unplayable. Winter's Grasp is up next. This is a 5-cost action that will shackle all enemy creatures, and I think it's actually pretty solid. It halts aggro very, very effectively in the same way that not Piercing Javelin. Um, uh, okay, Shrieking Harpy. Yep, that's the one. It halts aggro in the same way that Shrieking Harpy would, except it halts the entire board rather than just 1 creature, which is cool. Um, your opponent typically is never going to be expecting a Winter's Grasp to be pulled out on them, so they'll just kind of have to sit there and not do anything for a turn, and it feels pretty cool. Uh, no synergy with Betray on this one, I don't think, because proccing this action twice wouldn't do anything. So that's an interesting thing to note, but I think that it's pretty good. Okay, Wisdom of Ancients, 2-cost prophecy action. Give each friendly creature a random keyword. I think this is fine. Nothing particularly wrong with this card. I mean, it's got a decent cost for the value that it potentially will provide. And when compared to Royal Sage, at least with Wisdom of Ancients, it's not conditional and it costs 2 less. So you're sacrificing that 4/4 body that Royal Sage will uh, provide to your board state, but it's just instantly giving those keywords out. So something to keep in mind with that combo there. We're almost done, guys. We've got the Wisp Mother up next. 7 cost, 5/5. When you summon a creature that costs 2 or less, you summon a copy of that creature in the other lane. I'm also going to put Wisp Mother up into Great. I think a 7 cost 5/5 is super good for the stat line compared to the cost. We look at cards like Eclipse Baroness. It's an 8 cost 5/5. We are dealing with a 7 cost 5/5, and all that it's asking is that we have creatures with low cost, and she will duplicate them. Uh, Double Dunestalkers, pretty good thing to see. Double Awakened Dreamer, good thing to see. What are some more 2s or 1s? Double Deepwood Trapper would be good. Double Gloom Lurker could be good. Double Mournhold Trader would be good. It'd be good and bad. But you get my point here. Doubling any kind of creature is super cool. Doubling Wardcrafter, Harpy, Recruit, Bandari, Ungolem, all of this stuff is it's been done before and it's very fun. Now, it sometimes sucks because you'll play this thing down and then it'll get removed the next turn, but that's just the risk of playing any card in this game is that it's going to instantly get removed. So can't fault it too bad for that just simple aspect of the game. But all in all, I think Wisp Mother is a very fun card, and it provides a very interesting mechanic to the board when it's played down. And finally, we have the Yakuden Nightblade. This is a 1/4 for 1, and friendly equipped creatures are immune to being silenced. This is niche. It fits into item decks. It doesn't do anything outside of item decks, really. It basically just means if you have an item equipped, you cannot be silenced, which is very cool. I like that card quite a bit. I need to start using it more in my item decks because I forget that this card even exists half the time, but it's a 1 cost creature with a 1/4 stat line. That's almost unheard of. In fact, I think that is unheard of. It's just got a very crazy stat line and a very interesting like mechanic attached to it. The only downside is that you have to have an item equipped for it to do anything, really. So I think that's going to do it for the tier list this time, guys. We didn't really have that many low cards. I guess we did wind up with quite a few Ys by the end of this. But yeah, a lot of really solid choices. Not too many niche when compared to the other ones, right? Maybe it's similar, but like a lot of very solid choices, a lot of great choices, and a decent amount of S tier choices, I would say, when compared to the other decks. So, if you guys, as always, have any problems with where I put cards, feel free to do that. We had some people last time actually talking about the, oh, where did I put it in niche? Skeleton Lord. I know I put him in niche because people were mad at me about it. um, what is that guy's name? Bone Colossus, not Skeleton Lord. I was thinking of Dark Souls 2. Bone Colossus. A lot of people were saying that this guy's probably in the great tier, I believe, because he was a staple of like old school legends, which obviously I kind of missed out on that apparently. But looking at him now, he's a 7 cost 5/5, which again, very good stat line. So yeah, I believe you guys. That's a good card. I like it. I probably should have opened with that uh, during this video, but it is what it is. So um, I am planning on doing a big live stream at some point where we re-rank all of the cards together as a team. You guys can join me there once we're done. We've got what is this? Neutral. Man, my brain is cooked. Okay, we've got neutral to do next, which should be the shortest of all of the tier lists, and I should be able to get that one done pretty easily. And then we've got strength coming up and willpower, and then the multi-attribute cards, and then we're done. Not that many more to go. So I'm excited to finish out these last 4 or so tier lists, and I hope that you guys will join me on that journey. So I have been Dariloth. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.